A towering mountain was struck by multiple lightning bolts that lit up everything around it. Soon after, a young man was shown clearly being held prisoner by strange creatures. A grotesque beast, wielding a sword, warned of divine punishment. It declared that the next to face judgment would be a human who had invaded the sacred land of the beastkin. That young man had been in a cave just moments ago and was now accused of interspecies treason. His expression of fear and pain revealed a sweaty face completely devoid of hope. He believed he would be executed, as everything felt like a mad, senseless nightmare. Earlier that same day, he had called his friend to eat noodles at the cleaner's base. His partner warned him not to stray too far, as 2 more teams were still inside. The protagonist wanted to understand why so many people visited a C-rank cave. The friend explained that during that time, cleaners were appearing more and more frequently in caves. They weren't heroes, just trash collectors and survivors of failed trials. As the 2 were eating, someone waved to signal that the heroes were finally arriving. Knowing they needed to act fast, the young man swallowed the noodles almost without chewing. The C-rank heroes seemed annoyed, unable to imagine what A or S-rank caves were like. The cleaners were thrilled by the arrival of legends in shining armor. Everyone thought the heroes were amazing and dreamed of fame and fortune if they ever awakened powers. But those who failed the awakening test were sent straight to cleaning duties. One of the cleaners, thanking a heroine, asked if they could finally begin the sweep. The protagonist's name was Tsuyosuke, and he had failed to become a hero, ending up as a mere janitor. After the heroes defeated the Darklings, the cleaners would collect the forgotten remains in the ruined tunnels. Still, there was no real connection between the janitors and the renowned Radiant Warriors. These were opposing worlds, and Tsuyosuke had only accepted the mission after failing the test miserably. The cave seemed huge and in ruins, which was typical of a C-rank site. After hours of exploration, he found a shield fragment, which gave him unexpected hope. His friend said it was worth money and looked like a blessing from his long-departed parents. Excited, he decided to explore deeper, since treasures were usually hidden in the lower areas. 3 hours into digging, he found it strange that he hadn't come across anything else of value. His partner told him they were almost done, but Tsuyosuke wanted to dig a little more. That small fragment wouldn't even cover a single day of little Karina's medical expenses. Looking to the side, he spotted a dry well and began to sense the smell of fortune. Curious about the well's presence in the cave, he decided to investigate further. He dreamed of finding something whole and undamaged, enough to pay for a week of Karina's medicine. Finding a skull with a ring on its finger, he climbed down into the well and dug like mad. In disbelief at his own luck, he discovered a rare ring, the kind worth a fortune. He thought about using it just a little before submitting it for official evaluation and classification. As he slipped on the brightly glowing ring, he thanked his ancestors for such divine luck. Then he began to feel a strange discomfort on his skin, assuming it came from the ring itself. Suddenly, a message appeared, stating it was the ring without limits and that the gate would open. Confused, he had no idea whose voice it was or what was distorting reality around him. Everything began spinning, and he screamed for help in desperation, unable to understand what was happening. Some people outside recognized his voice but assumed he had simply changed locations. Meanwhile, Tsuyosuke lost consciousness, only to wake up captured by beast men before an altar. He realized the divine punishment mentioned was a massive bolt of lightning descending from the sky. Seated on a golden throne was the Beast King, observing the scene with an imposing expression. An officer beside him announced the execution of 3 criminals accused of severe interspecies treason. The first was one of their own, accused of selling information to humans and elves. They threw him onto the altar and declared that, by royal order, he would face divine judgment without mercy. They kicked the traitor into the center, where lightning struck with brutal force. His body was violently electrocuted as the beast men roared in excitement at the punishment. Then they announced that the next was the human who had violated the sacred land for the first time. They threw Tsuyosuke in, shouting that it was all a misunderstanding, but no one wanted to hear his frantic explanations. The great beast grabbed him and began tossing him back and forth. Even in that horrific moment, 2 thoughts wouldn't leave his mind: Karina and a dream of becoming a hero. The wild crowd demanded more punishment, thrilled by the human's suffering on the cursed altar. Before the lightning struck, he moved with difficulty and managed to dodge the first bolt. The guards overseeing the next execution grew irritated, as nothing like that had ever happened before. The next person was a brown-haired girl, watching everything in complete silence. The general saw it as provocation that the human had avoided the lightning, a feat without precedent in that ancestral ceremony. The Beast King merely observed, curious, without interfering or showing any visible reaction to the act. Tsuyosuke, even with his frail body, refused to accept such a pathetic end in such a bizarre place. But then the second bolt struck him directly, making everyone believe it was truly the end. The general smiled, satisfied, believing that the second lightning bolt confirmed the human's guilt. They were already preparing the girl for punishment, not even checking if Tsuyosuke was truly gone. However, the ring on his finger shone, and he mumbled that it couldn't end there. After activation, the system authentication began, followed by the bodily repair of this unlikely user. The king began to notice that life still remained in the nearly charred human's body. Even the general realized he was still breathing as more bolts struck his body in succession. The system notified that physical reconstruction had reached 15% and was now progressing rapidly. The beasts grew uneasy with the delay in punishment, as it seemed the lightning was strengthening him. Instead of being destroyed, the human appeared to become more resilient with each new strike. At 40% complete, the system activated a skill called Divine Eye, now bound to the bearer. He rose with difficulty, as something powerful called to him with an almost hypnotic and surreal pull. He began walking toward a large axe surrounded by mystical lightning on the altar. The spectators, confused, watched the transformation of someone who had once been disposable and worthless. At 60% physical reconstruction, he also mysteriously acquired the skill Inventory of Divine Consciousness. The general couldn't believe that anyone besides the Divine King could endure such judgment for so long. Everyone was amazed to see him approach the Divine Hammer, something considered impossible for ordinary mortals. Tsuyosuke felt the hammer calling to him, but didn't fully understand the reason for such a connection. When reconstruction hit 100%, the system selected a special status and allowed him to lift it. With that, the protagonist raised the Divine King's hammer before all the stunned beast men. All the beast folk were left in shock by everything that had just happened. No one expected that a so-called criminal would be the one to lift the axe. But as soon as the protagonist raised the axe above his head, it began to change shape. The hammer transformed, no longer emanating an overwhelming pressure of energy, but into something he could wield. The beast girl was also shocked by what was happening. No one could have predicted how it would unfold. The beast general, too, couldn't accept that things might end like this, and if his thoughts had been audible, he was furious at the audacity, thinking not even the king of the beast folk could have lifted the hammer. With that, the protagonist felt stronger and paused to check his status window. Thus, he began to meticulously study his new attributes. Without warning, as the protagonist was still analyzing the system's stats, someone leaped at him. Trying to catch him off guard, the attacker shouted, asking how he dared touch such a precious artifact with those filthy hands. The entire army showed joy, as they knew the general was the strongest, and everyone expected a swift result. That beast man couldn't understand how the protagonist had avoided divine punishment, but now he demanded the artifact be returned before it began channeling its power back. The status screen quickly displayed a new passive skill for the protagonist called Divine Eye. He now understood that it allowed him to read his opponent. He could read their weapons and skills. The one in front of him was the general, level 84, wielding extremely powerful weapons. With the general before him, he realized how his passive ability worked and saw everything through the Divine Eye. That general began to shout, asking how a lowly human dared defy the will of the great beast folk. And just as the opponent went to strike, Tsuyosuke dodged and said there had to be a misunderstanding, as he could never do such a thing. Since he could never defeat a level 84 orc, he thought his words would clear things up. While he waited for a reply, he simply saw the orc attack again, not even listening. Watching it all, the beast girl thought the protagonist's fate was nothing to envy. Since Hyuga was one of the 5 generals, everyone knew that even among the beast folk, that general was incredibly strong. Now in place of the altar, appeared a massive column of smoke, dust, and raw magical energy. With so many energy strikes, sparks flew from the orc's attacks against the young hero. But with his skill, artifact, and the hammer, Tsuyosuke was able to endure it all, holding the weapon firmly. The general, frowning, was greatly surprised to realize that this individual had managed to block his powerful strikes. Even so, General Hyuga attributed all that splendor to the magnificent existence of the divine hammer. Calmly, the protagonist was trying to soothe the furious orc and explained that it was all just a misunderstanding. He tried again to say this, but the orc would never listen to a human and attacked with great speed. Expecting a spectacular result, he grabbed the protagonist by the neck and lifted him above his head, with thoughts of crushing him. At that moment, a status window appeared for the protagonist. With it, he managed to activate another passive skill, now able to copy any enemy ability. All he could do now was use this new skill immediately, but for that, he had to touch the orc's chest. Very quickly, he managed to press his fingers against the orc's chest. As he fell, not understanding what was happening, the general groaned and assumed a strange posture. Having completed all the necessary actions, the protagonist fell into the orc's consciousness and began to choose which ability he wanted to use. He had an enormous variety before him and only a few seconds to decide. The abilities were all very different and uncommon, yet extremely powerful. And meanwhile, the rival asked in panic what the protagonist was doing, dazed by the strange action that had just occurred. In the next moment, the protagonist flew from the sky with another strike aimed at the general, having copied one of his strongest attacks. Now their blows collided, one blocking the other, leaving the orc absolutely stunned. In a split second, A wave of concentrated magical energy descended in a single blow upon the orc. That strong strike seemed like the most incredible thing, but the entire crowd of orcs near the altar was shocked, impressed, because in the end, that mighty-looking blow turned out to be completely painless. All because the protagonist lacked the proficiency and the correct weapon, so there was no damage. This left the protagonist quite stunned as he realized the move was absurdly powerful. Both of them were left unsure of what to do next. Neither could imagine it would end that way. After a brief pause, the general picked up his sword and ran again toward the protagonist, yelling how a filthy man dared to attack an orc. Suddenly, under the backdrop of a blood-red moon, the king of the beast folk rose and shouted for the fight to stop, and with that, the entire crowd was stunned. The Beast King himself had graced everyone, even the rivals, with his presence, and from him emerged a shockwave. Seeing this without understanding, the protagonist tried to shield his eyes and brace himself so he wouldn't be thrown back. Slowly the dust settled, revealing the image before the protagonist. It was the king of the beast folk, and when he knelt and bowed his head before the protagonist, all his subordinates were struck with terror. Then he said that the divine axe had chosen the protagonist. After standing up, he placed both hands on the protagonist's shoulders and said the gods had sent a sign from the heavens, for he was the first in hundreds of years to be chosen by the hammer, and the fact that he was human made the situation strange, since all who ruled the land of the beast folk had always been beasts. Everyone went silent as the king said that no one in centuries had forged a divine vessel, except that man. This protagonist was truly the future ruler of the beast people, and all should allow him to grow. As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd immediately began to doubt the decisions of the current king. The general also tried to persuade his master, saying that this person was just a man. Looking at the general and replying, the king turned and said the prophecy was not up for debate. The orc, upon hearing that the king said the prophecy did not specify whether the king would be a beast folk or not, simply knelt in agreement. Concerned with knowing the man's name, the royal attendant asked the protagonist what he was called. Upon receiving the answer, he told the protagonist that he was still far too weak to become king of an entire nation. He also said that in 1 year he should grow stronger and return to the land of the beast folk. Then all would see if he was worthy. After saying that, the king placed a kind of spell on the protagonist's head, saying it was necessary for his return in a year. If he didn't return, the king would use the mark to find and eliminate him. After applying the mark to his head, he explained its purpose. His attention was then drawn by a cry from the crowd, as someone shouted in agreement with great force. That person turned out to be the beast girl, who was also meant to be executed after him. The protagonist recognized the girl, who was in the same situation as him, and looked at her traits using the divine eye. He saw results he could never have expected upon seeing the level of skill the girl possessed. She was level 72. He couldn't believe she was that strong and questioned why she was to be executed. After observing her qualities, he raised his hand and waved in her direction with gratitude. He added that she was right, because he too had seen this incredible opportunity. Turning to the king, he agreed with the proposal but made one condition. No one could believe that after being pardoned, the boy still dared to demand conditions. That's when the protagonist extended his finger and pointed toward the crowd, saying she would go with him. As he pointed, he mentioned the beast girl, who could hardly believe she had been chosen. He now wanted to ensure that both he and the beast girl would be safe, and he owed her nothing more. Some time later, under the cover of night at some campsite, the protagonist stopped at the gate and waited. Until his new companion arrived, he stood up and reflected on why all of this was happening. As he thought about the Ring of Infinity, he heard a pleasant voice that made him turn his head. When he finished turning, he saw the voice belonged to the beast girl, now barely recognizable in different clothes. With that, lustful thoughts filled the protagonist's mind as he looked at the beautiful young woman before him. Blushing slightly and trying to hide it, he said it was nothing, he was only returning the help he had received. Hearing those words, she blushed as well and said he had no idea how much that meant to her. Holding his hands, she said no one had ever protected her the way he had. He gave her a second chance and even allowed her to call him master. A little more flushed, she said he had become a true miracle in her life, and now she was ready to repay him. After getting so close and holding his hand, the young man blushed and tried to agree without showing how he felt. She let go of his hands and turned, standing under the moonlight, and said it was a bit dark now. Joking with him, she said it would be wise to be careful while walking on dark roads. He tried to return to normal after everything that had happened and was trying to breathe, regaining his original composure. He said they were now in a wonderful new world, but after saying those words, he somewhat snapped back to reality and realized he wasn't in his own world. He remembered that he had entered that world through some kind of endless portal, which had activated after interacting with the ring, and he wondered if falling into it again might bring him back. At that moment, the ring on his finger glowed, and it seemed like it had managed to open a passage, but he still wasn't sure if he could return. Once the ring began pulling him, he became extremely happy, and in a fraction of a second disappeared. And the moment he was transported from one world to another, he realized the sensations during transfer would not be pleasant. A second later, his movement was complete, and now he found himself back at the well where he had climbed out to retrieve the ring. He decided to reveal his traits and was overjoyed that his abilities had remained intact after changing world. He began talking to himself, saying that if his level from the other world was preserved, even his stats had been synchronized during the transition, and those now looking into the well were his companions. Reacting to his last shout, they were at the well to check if he was alright and to call him to leave. Clueless about how much time had passed, he figured they'd been waiting for a long while. He had no idea what had happened, and was sure he had spent more than 5 hours in another world. The protagonist's friend was happy he was alright and had just been sitting in the well the entire time. It was then the protagonist realized that while he was in the other world, his home world had stopped, and all the events that happened there closely resembled the plot of a manga. He wondered if time had also stopped in the other world, and who the previous owner of the Ring of Infinity had been. When the protagonist climbed out of the well, he excitedly asked if there would be a new awakening test the next day. The next scene revealed a flashback from the protagonist's past, where he carried his sister in his arms. She was bleeding under the heavy rain, and destruction could be seen all around the city. Cars were completely destroyed, roads reduced to rubble, and panicked people were running and screaming without direction. In the midst of the chaos, the silhouette of a colossal monster appeared, the origin of all the devastation spreading around. The protagonist's city had been reduced to ruins, and his sister, in his arms, said she could no longer feel her legs. Her voice was weak, her eyes half closed, and her pale face showed how fragile she had become. The protagonist's eyes were red, filled with rage, frustration, and despair in the face of the tragedy. While his sister asked if their parents were okay, an explosion erupted behind them. Huge columns of dust rose to the skies, accompanied by debris and flying fragments of destroyed buildings. All that destruction approached them like a storm ready to swallow everything in its path. The protagonist began to tremble, paralyzed by fear, tears streaming uncontrollably down his face. With his heart racing, he feared for his life, and more than anything, for the life of his beloved sister. All he could do was scream, calling for help at the top of his lungs as the storm reached them. Amid the despair, a hand appeared in front of him, a firm, protective hand emerging from the shadows. It was the hand of the Savior who brought them back to the world of the living, pushing away the threatening darkness. It was his uncle who appeared and said they could not stop running under any circumstance. If they stopped, they would die instantly, as the darkness would catch them without mercy. The uncle also said they could not return for their parents, as that path would be a one-way trip. The protagonist's voice rose in desperation, insisting that their parents were still in the city. But the only response he got was that he would never defeat the darkness alone in that state. The giant monster continued destroying the city, smashing buildings as if they were made of paper. In the next moment, the narrative returns to the present, where the protagonist's sister was already feeling a little better. She was awake but could no longer walk, and asked if her brother would take the awakening test. He had just come back from work, and the nurse was advising Karina to take better care of herself. The protagonist approached his sister and spoke gently about her well-being, trying to comfort her. Upset, she replied that she was fine, even though she still couldn't get up on her own. She said she was already used to the constant pain and to being unable to walk normally. Hearing that, the protagonist felt a deep sadness, a pain piercing through his chest without mercy. Even so, he activated his scanning ability on his sister to check her health condition. The results showed that her legs were almost completely and irreversibly compromised. The chances of recovery were extremely low, bordering on impossible and unlikely. He thought about everything she should have experienced: school, travel, fun, parties, and lost dreams. He wanted her to have had a normal life, and seeing her constant suffering left him deeply afflicted. Even with the odds being nearly zero, he wanted to see her stand again, if only for a single day. He believed that if he became a hero, maybe he could find an improbable but possible solution. He desired more than to heal his sister. He wanted to live a life of dignity and be able to make a difference. With that thought in mind, he raised his hand with the ring toward the glowing moon in the sky. After some time, he headed to the Awakening Test Center, where a young man was already being tested. The boy was rich and confident, and his parents were planning a huge party to celebrate his inevitable success. The tester explained to the protagonist how everything would work, telling him to enter once he was ready. A man in a suit commented that he doubted the protagonist's results would be better than the last. Even so, the protagonist entered the room with full confidence and unshakable determination. The examiner warned that if he failed the test once, he would likely fail all future attempts as well. He said the device measured everything precisely, and that he had dealt with many frustrated, stubborn people. As he walked forward with purpose, the protagonist heard the man talking about the latest recorded results. The previous subject had a combat level of 3, just like the one before him. Things rarely changed much over time. The protagonist figured he might also be at level 3, but he hoped something surprising would happen. He placed his hand on the panel and activated the perfect physical conditioning mode with total focus. His entire body tensed, filled with an intense and electrifying energy that made him vibrate. The panel's indicators exceeded the scale, and the device began to malfunction under the extreme pressure. The inspector outside noticed a small tremor coming from the test room, accompanied by strange lights. With just one hand, the protagonist broke the strength record that had stood for 30 consecutive years. Even he couldn't believe it was possible to generate such a number. It was 10 times greater than the previous record. He felt a wave of power surge through his entire body, and a huge smile spread across his face. Excited, he wondered how much stronger he would become if he used the legendary divine hammer. A message warned that due to his level, he could only use one strike with that sacred weapon. Even so, he prepared to measure the combat power of the divine axe of the king of the gods. He channeled the weapon's energy, and his eyes shone intensely with the power concentrated in his hands. Soon after, he received a notification saying only 1 second of energy remained. Upon activating the hammer's power, all the energy was drained in the blink of an eye, as if it evaporated. He had to act fast to measure his strength before completely losing control of the unstable power. With the veins in his face bulging, a portal suddenly opened in the sky above the building. That presence was so powerful it blanketed the city with intense, shimmering magical flows. They spread in the form of dragons, flying out of the portal with majesty. The entire test center building lost power due to that unusual event. After inspection, a man with glasses entered the room to report the electrical failure in the system. However, instead of a muscular man, there was only an exhausted young man breathing heavily and unevenly. Walking down the hallway, now with a modest appearance, he thought he had underestimated the sacred hammer. All of his power had been drained in a second, but at least now he was officially an awakened hero. Soon after, he was sent to the training area with the other newly graduated and excited heroes. The instructor was a man with white hair and shining armor with huge golden shoulder plates. The protagonist observed his level and combat strength as the man spoke with a firm voice. The others were cheerful and laughing, but he was pensive and disappointed by the instructor's level. The instructor himself seemed frustrated, as he preferred clearing dungeons to teaching lazy rookies. He announced that the next morning, everyone would go to their first dungeon for mandatory practical training. The recruits were shocked. They had only expected simple drills at the beginning of training. With a serious expression, the instructor explained that this was to develop their real and latent abilities. He warned that the training would be hard, and anyone unprepared could quit right away. He took out his frustration on the rookies, and the protagonist fully understood that suffocating feeling. Even so, he knew that something greater awaited him in another world of possibilities. A beast girl of level 72 was waiting for him, and that thought filled him with joy. After the initial instructions, he went home thinking the time to depart had finally come. The ring shone brightly, opening the portal to the beast people's world he had come to know. There he was again, gazing at the bright moon and missing the familiar environment. He sat on a dune, wreathed in the fresh air, and observed the desert landscape with care. He noticed that the transition hadn't changed anything, not even his clothes or gear. Soon, the beast girl appeared, asking if something had happened or if everything was okay. A bit shy, he replied that everything was fine, his cheeks slightly blushing. She was pleased with his answer and said that not far from there was a band of dangerous goblins. These goblins were level 3, and she warned him of the danger of underestimating them in direct combat. Even so, he smiled upon hearing that, as he considered them his first real targets. They moved toward the goblin camp, staying silent to avoid alarming the monsters. The protagonist commented that, being level 72, she could defeat them with absolute ease. She was surprised, as she had never revealed her level to him at any moment. He wanted to observe how high-level warriors fought so he could learn from them. She explained that if she helped, he wouldn't gain experience due to the massive level gap. Though frustrated, he understood, and she asked him to watch closely and learn carefully. With a fierce gaze, she charged at the goblins, her dagger glowing with magical energy. In one quick and precise strike, she cut down several of them at once with impressive mastery. The protagonist couldn't hold back and leaped from the bushes, clapping excitedly like an amazed child. She turned and smiled, stars in her eyes, pleased by the genuine and spontaneous praise. She said she always gave her best, even against weak and disorganized opponents. She spoke about her special skill, meant for high-level and well-trained warriors. He promised that one day he would become a warrior worthy of her and of her world. Thanks to the divine system, he knew he could copy skills from others regardless of class. The girl blushed and apologized, as she felt he was choosing to be a warrior just because of her. Taking his hand, she said he needed to choose his tools and his destiny wisely. The protagonist felt happy to be back and close to his trustworthy companion. Suddenly, a shout echoed, announcing the arrival of more goblins in an aggressive formation. He asked for a dagger and said he would handle the 2 enemies coming down the trail by himself. She tried to warn him it was dangerous, but he had already taken a combat stance without hesitation. He leaped at the goblins with his dagger charged with magical energy, and used the Sky Shake skill. A huge explosion occurred, and the girl watched in awe, her eyes shining with excitement. The battle was easier than he expected, and he was starting to enjoy the divine selection system. After eliminating all the goblins there, the protagonist reached out to one of the bodies, searching for anything useful. What he found was a wooden club, and his companion commented that they needed to get basic equipment more quickly. Hearing that, the protagonist looked at himself and agreed with what she had just said. Then he had a curious thought. Could he move objects from his inventory between worlds? It seemed that the inventory of divine consciousness would evolve alongside his skills and levels. After reflecting for a while on the stored items, he decided to take a closer look at the gear his companion was using. He noticed the equipment was divided into 5 categories: torso, arms, hips, head, and feet. All needed to be covered for full protection. As he was analyzing that, the girl asked if there was something strange on her face, but he replied that he just wanted to be sure she was keeping up. Still, she found his behavior odd, especially how his face had suddenly turned red. While the boy got lost in thoughts and daydreams, the girl remained alert and instantly noticed the imminent danger. She saw goblins approaching from behind with malicious intent, clearly intending to take her at any cost, and she had already warned about their depraved nature. It was clear that the farther they advanced, the stronger the goblins became, and they would have to be very careful not to fall into traps. Realizing that experience gained increased with the enemy's level, the protagonist ran toward the monsters to collect the falling points. All at once, he managed to eliminate 3 goblins in front of him with a quick and precise move. He did it using a skill he was already familiar and comfortable with. After the dust settled, he didn't waste any time and began clearing out the rest of the enemies without hesitation. Now more confident and focused, he struck a precise blow with his club, knocking another goblin to the ground with ease. Without delay, he rushed to collect the experience, since the higher the enemy's level, the more points he would earn. However, the weapon he was using was very weak, and after that intense battle, the wooden club crumbled completely. The young woman accompanying him had watched the whole fight and now felt even more admiration for him. She thought the master had incredible strength, and the way he wielded the club made it seem like his level was much higher than it really was. Despite the level difference between them, he had managed to defeat 3 enemies at once, and that made her jump with joy. The protagonist hadn't expected the bonus points in that world to be so high. Now he was becoming stronger. He remembered the times when he worked as a cleaner and heard heroes complain that the experience from kobolds was always low. If they rarely entered dungeons, they'd never level up. And besides, in his original world, there was a hero alliance that required team formation to explore dungeons, which meant experience had to be shared. On the other hand, in this world, he didn't have to share points at all, which was a huge advantage. He now realized that he could level up much faster, but he knew he'd have to face the boss, as they were now standing at its passage. Hidden behind a rock, they could feel the evil energy the boss was radiating, a presence that mixed malice with something awe-inspiring. It was clear from a distance that this was the true goblin boss, much larger and more terrifying than the others. The beast girl commented that unfortunately, the boss had been possessed by darkness, which made it even more powerful. The protagonist was surprised to learn that darkness also existed in that world, perhaps even the same darkness that destroyed his own. With her experience, the girl warned that enemies taken by darkness were extremely dangerous and unpredictable. She said the boss was level 6, but with the power of darkness, that level could multiply and become an overwhelming force. Because of that, in her view, it would be better if she fought the monster herself, but the protagonist refused, with courage and determination. He was determined to face that challenge alone as a way of avenging everything the darkness had done to his parents. And so, the debate between the two began as time passed and the tension grew. Seeing that his attacks caused little damage, in a burst of rage, the protagonist intensified his strikes with increasing force. He did it all, consumed by anger over what the darkness had done to him and also to Karina, his friend from the previous world. But the goblin boss took advantage of an opening and landed a brutal blow that tore the hero's clothes and sent him flying. He was thrown dozens of meters, hitting obstacles and crashing into rocks before finally falling to the ground, severely wounded and nearly unconscious. Even while down and weak, he continued cursing the darkness, trying to stay awake through the unbearable pain. The goblin boss remained completely enraged, drool dripping from his mouth as he roared and prepared for the final strike. Determined to end the hero once and for all, he used his elongated tongue like a living spear. However, the monster seemed unaware of the beast woman's presence, who was ready to jump in and assist the protagonist. She appeared in the boy's line of sight, and even though he was injured, he rose and murmured to himself that he wouldn't allow this. He would never let the creature that destroyed his parents' lives walk away victorious, and his eyes began to glow with intense fury. At that moment, the divine selection system activated absolute physical form mode without any warning. His body began to transform, gaining muscle and an aura that emitted radiant light beams in all directions. He decided that if he didn't have a weapon, then he would use his own body as the ultimate weapon. With that decision, he charged like lightning and delivered a blow so powerful it pierced through the goblin boss's body. In a split second, the strike left not even a 1% chance of survival for the grotesque creature. Faced with such power, the clothes the protagonist wore tore at the edges like wet paper. He passed straight through the monster, and the beast girl, who watched everything, had a look of complete frenzy in her eyes. She was utterly astonished to see the master eliminate his first boss with such ease and brutality. When the dust finally settled, the boss's carcass fell to the ground, marking the end of the intense battle. The protagonist's silhouette slowly emerged from the dust, and now his level had increased considerably. Even without a proper weapon, he was now stronger than ever and ready for whatever came next. The young woman noticed the hero was injured, especially the hand he had used to crush the goblin with a devastating strike. Having used so much force, he no longer had enough energy to even remain standing. As all the system messages arrived, he lost consciousness in that exact instant. Fortunately, the beast girl caught him before his body hit the ground. Gently, she supported him and laid him carefully against her warm, comforting chest. Then, calmly, she placed the hero in her lap and searched her bag for a first aid kit. She wanted to restore his strength and heal his wounds with the best care possible. An hour later, a pair of bats played joyfully around the quiet edges of the cave. The protagonist already felt better, his strength restored and his wounds completely healed. He noticed that recovery in that world was slow, but far more effective than he expected. This realization made him reflect on the history of pharmacology and its advancements in that universe. His companion was excited to see him smile, as her remedy had worked perfectly. Then she cheerfully volunteered to go claim the reward for defeating the boss. The two of them left the cave in search of the prize hidden in the dark depths. Soon ahead, the dark treasures appeared, gleaming under the faint light of the area. It was a golden chest with a sinister purple eye embedded in the center of the lid. The protagonist felt satisfied, as all his effort had finally paid off. After so much hard work, he would now receive his well-earned gleaming reward. Carefully, he began opening the chest lid with still trembling hands. A golden light poured out from inside, revealing that the treasures were incredibly rare. It was then that he remembered he had only one inventory slot left. This made him wonder whether a full set of armor could occupy just that single space. Seeing the master smiling in a mysterious way, the young woman wondered what kind of reaction would be appropriate. She wanted to understand why he was smiling so much, as if he had hidden something very interesting. Running his hand through his hair, he said he was just happy to receive his reward. After leaving the cave, they decided to get some fresh air under the calm moonlight. They sat atop a hill bathed in moonlight, where they decided to sew new clothes. In the end, the companion finished and gifted the protagonist a beautiful shirt. The piece turned out black, but it matched the hero's style and appearance perfectly. As he put it on, he was pleased with his partner's work and her craftsmanship. The fit was perfect, and it made him reflect on his growth and the journey that led him there. Now that he was stronger, it was time to return home and find a place to belong in that world. After some time, he finally managed to return peacefully to rest. Lying in bed, he recalled all the hardships he had faced in finding a safe place. He thought about how he had waited for her to fall asleep before returning safely. This time he had received many things, but he couldn't stop time in that world. He needed deep rest before the next stage of the journey. The next morning, the system sent a message asking if he would like to test the new equipment. He accepted immediately, excited by the possibility of seeing his armor in action. Upon testing the armor, he discovered it had an impressive special built-in ability. However, he realized he couldn't show that suit to other heroes, even if he was proud of it. Unfortunately, reality was cruel. Heroes could attack each other for valuable items. If they saw a newcomer with gear like that, they would certainly grow suspicious and strike. Thankfully, through the system, he found an option that allowed him to conceal the mysterious armor. The feature made it invisible, as if he were wearing simple, ordinary clothing. There were only a few minutes left until the meeting, and the protagonist needed a quick snack. But before eating, he received an urgent call from the hospital about his sister. Some people had invaded the place and were trying to take the girl without authorization. After warning that everyone should be prepared for the consequences, the hero stood still with his hand on the door. They said she owed money and that he should go to the hospital as soon as possible. With that, he shouted for the doctor not to allow any outside interference. In a sudden rage, he crushed the phone, overtaken by an uncontrollable impulse. His eyes burned with fury, and his face was marked by expressions of pure hatred. Even in that state, he walked to the front door, raising his terrifying aura, and headed to the hospital. The scene shifted to Karina, who was struggling in the hospital, begging not to be touched. Frightened, she asked what they wanted, as nothing made sense to her. The leader of the group approached her and revealed it was all because of her brother's debt. He explained that the boy owed money and hadn't paid, so they were taking her away. He said they had only agreed to lend the money because the boss already had his eye on her. The brother had signed a contract to borrow the money, fully aware of the lender's ulterior motives. The man grabbed the girl's face and claimed that if she agreed, they would spare her brother. Even in tears, Karina knew her brother would never accept something so repulsive. While holding her, the man made a vile expression, trying to intimidate her. He thought he could break her will, but before he could continue, her brother burst through the door. He was completely furious at the recklessness of those malicious thugs. His eyes burned with rage and hatred, revealing that he would not tolerate such madness. The girl was startled to see him there, but relieved she called out to him in a trembling voice. The man, looking back, greeted the young man, saying he had finally shown up. Seeing the protagonist's fury, he asked why he had such an angry look on his face. He said they were just following the agreement, trying to maintain an air of control. But when he said the boy didn't need a sister like her, he didn't get to finish the sentence. He was punched so hard in the face that a tooth was launched across the room without mercy. The strike was so powerful it sent him spinning in the air like an out-of-control top. It couldn't be any different. The hero was possessed with rage at that provocation. The blow was fierce enough to launch him a good distance with brutal force. Even seeing the protagonist's strength, the bodyguards rushed forward to defend their master's honor. Hoping to de-escalate the situation, they charged in without hesitation, believing in their skills. But what they didn't realize was that the hero's killing intent was growing by the second. As soon as one bodyguard launched his attack, the hero countered with deadly precision. Moments later, the man was on the floor, his arm completely shattered. The other held his young master, unable to believe the strength he had just witnessed. The spoiled man, with a wicked expression, clenched his teeth and glared at the hero with hatred. He claimed that no one ever questioned his orders, and then pulled out a hidden weapon. He tried to paralyze the hero by firing at him without hesitation. Seeing the bullet's trajectory, Karina screamed desperately, fearing the worst for her brother, but there was no need to fear, as she had known her brother's new abilities. He caught the bullet with his hand, clenching his fist and revealing the veins pulsing with fury. Upon seeing that, Karina was in total shock, unsure of what to think or say. The men, even with a weapon, couldn't understand what they were witnessing. Meanwhile, the hero's aura transformed into something sinister and terrifying. Using the system, he modified his hands and could now catch bullets naturally. As soon as the three realized the young man was a hero, they trembled with uncontrollable fear. Arriving just in time, a nurse, accompanied by police officers, asked the hero for help. She said some men had invaded the room and threatened a doctor and a patient. When they were released, the three told the young man to pay the debt as soon as possible. Otherwise, their boss would show up and cause even more trouble. Trying to appear polite, they apologized to the nurse and the officer, attempting to escape. However, their boss was said to be a level 10 warrior, feared throughout the region. At least that's what they believe, though reality would prove to be quite different. After everyone left, the brother apologized to Karina, gently trying to comfort her. He adjusted the blanket covering her legs, fully aware of the danger that was approaching. Karina was surprised to discover that her brother had truly become a hero. A few hours later, everyone was transported with the hero to the training center. The instructor announced that they were gathered in front of the dungeon gate for a practical lesson. He explained there were rules and that all equipment found in the cave would belong to him. He said that as for the test, they shouldn't worry, as he would accompany them. However, each person would need to pay 20,000 yen for his services. After that statement, doubts arose among the candidates gathered there. The hero raised his hand and asked why they had to pay if the professor kept everything. A guy with glasses appeared behind the protagonist and told him to be quiet. He claimed the instructor was part of the Mad Wolves Guild, feared by everyone. Clenching his fists, the hero declared he wouldn't pay a single cent. The instructor, disagreeing, insisted that those were the rules, and that was final. Even with his face twisted in anger, the instructor said he could go alone if he wanted. At that, everyone began speaking at once, creating a huge commotion. They said no one had ever passed the test without help or guidance. Still, the hero decided he would face the dungeon completely on his own. Without the professor to extort and no other candidates to slow him down, he'd have more freedom. The person in charge of recording the results was shocked by the young man's boldness. With concern, they warned that the test could be extremely dangerous and even fatal. Unbothered, the hero stepped confidently into the dark dungeon. He soon found himself in a magical forest surrounded by strange, spiral-shaped trees. The curved roots formed patterns that resembled natural mazes. Shortly after entering, he was struck on the head by a goblin wielding a club. However, the monster's weapon broke, and the hero simply turned and looked at him. He began to speak threateningly, saying surprise attacks wouldn't work. As he said this, the hero grabbed the monster's remaining weapons and delivered a crushing blow. He knew that no other strike would compare to that raw power. He was already aware that the experience earned here was different from the other world. It was no surprise that heroes took so long to level up. Tsukishiro knew other goblins were watching, and after eliminating the first, he spoke. They could come out and attack. He wanted a fair and direct fight. He was prepared to face them all with his new special armor. He activated the Rust Tentacle skill, spreading them in every direction. Several tentacles burst from his armor, impaling the goblins in a devastating assault. It looked like massive white whips striking with force in all possible directions. The scene shifted to the other side of the portal, where the examiner waited. There were no records of anyone completing the exam alone and in full consciousness. The examiner thought that if it really happened, Tsukishiro would be in every newspaper. And so, a hero emerged who completed the entire exam and came out without a single injury. Only dust fell from his clothes, and the silence marked his solitary victory. A portal opened, and the examiner watched a group that had also passed the trial, though they seemed dissatisfied. The crowd was disappointed because the examiner had refused to help but still took the money. They were entering the cave for the first time and had received no proper guidance. The examiner stated that at that level, they were supposed to pay 40,000, and he had already reduced the price by half. After those words, he received a call informing him that the hero had passed the test alone. That's when an unfamiliar expression appeared on the examiner's face, a mix of shock and anger. He later found the protagonist washing his face and asked how he had pulled it off. Since he was only level 4, the examiner wanted to know if he had used some high-tier equipment. The protagonist replied that just because no one had passed before didn't mean it was impossible. Hearing that the boy had also managed to save 20,000, the examiner became furious at his behavior. Even when he threatened him by claiming he belonged to the Mad Wolves Guild, the protagonist wasn't intimidated. When he heard that the guild wasn't that strong, the examiner got ready to try to attack him. Easily, the protagonist grabbed the examiner's fist and asked if he really wanted to fight him. With those fragile level 9 fists, the protagonist's speed and power were unmatched for someone at his level. Still, the examiner couldn't believe the protagonist was only level 4. After showing his power and skill, the protagonist let go of the examiner's fist, thinking it was over. Taking just one step back, the examiner grabbed a hidden dagger. The protagonist noticed and asked him to wait a moment, but the man didn't want to listen and sought revenge. Without caring for any explanation, he attacked the hero, but even then, he couldn't pierce his skin. The protagonist was wearing the protective set from the goblin suit, which had activated involuntarily. This caused the examiner's blade to snap in half the moment it touched the armor. The examiner's eyes widened, and he asked if the protagonist was hiding some kind of equipment. Now annoyed, the hero realized he had accidentally revealed his secret abilities. The examiner's face became disturbed, and a sinister smile formed. His eyes sparkled with interest. Pressing further, he asked if the protagonist had stolen something from the cave or if it was his own secret. However, the hero started rambling nonsense, saying that without that protection, he would never have survived. Luckily, a tester stepped in and handed him a certificate proving he had officially become a hero. The protagonist thought that guy was his savior, since now the instructor wouldn't make a scene in front of the team. After the hero left, the guild examiner was left alone, and an evil plan seemed to form in his mind. Following the tester, the protagonist reflected that thanks to his system, his combat power was far beyond that of an average level 4, but facing high-level enemies was still a big problem he needed to solve. Sometime later, the protagonist was already in his room, thinking it might have been excessive to draw so much attention from the examiner, Gaia. Meanwhile, 2 thieves were trying to break into his apartment, planning to force the door quietly. They believed they could immobilize him using magic, since one of the intruders was a level 10 mage. This mage carried a staff with a magical ruby, while the second thief was the examiner himself. They initially planned to destroy the chain with magic, so the mage cautiously cast his spell. Surprisingly, before they could finish, the door was kicked open by the protagonist himself, who emerged roaring and wielding a club. His eyes glowed like red flames, announcing his fury toward those trying to take what was his. With a fast and powerful strike, he hit the mage who had been seated with his staff. Everyone knew that combat power was a sign of a hero's abilities, and has now reached 6,000. If it were an RPG, it would be like a low-level warrior fighting a weak high-level boss. Realizing that, the mage asked the protagonist if he was trying to deceive him with some kind of illusion. The mage strengthened the protection of his cloak to resist the blow, planning to eliminate the boy and take all the loot. He cast a fire spell, releasing a flame against the protagonist to defeat him. The hero had to flee, remembering that his armor was vulnerable to magic, but not to physical attacks. He jumped from the top to the ground to hide from the two, intending to use the leg enhancement to land safely. But before he could, he fell into a trap previously set by the enemies. A man stronger than the two before leaped from the ground and struck the protagonist in the stomach with his knee. With the next blow, the enemy hurled him downward, displaying strength and malicious intent. During the fall, the protagonist increased his physical strength, but even so, he received a brutal impact. The attacker's allies came to assist, and the mage asked the protagonist what ability he had used. The hero didn't want to hear that kind of question anymore. His rage was so intense he only thought about taking them all down, so he activated his armor and used his tentacle ability, roaring to strike the enemies. To prevent the hero from using his abilities, the mage cast a restriction spell that caused him to lose his armor. That situation left the protagonist confused for a moment, but the enemies quickly tried to attack him again. The only option left to him was a ring, so he used the movement between worlds to escape. There was no other way out in such a desperate situation, and while traveling between the worlds, he made a promise. When he returned home, he would be 1,000 times stronger and would easily defeat the entire trio. Now he found himself in the place where he and his partner had fallen asleep before transitioning between worlds. He knew he needed to learn new skills, so he looked back to call the beast girl. He was soon impressed to see the young girl asleep, covered only by a small rag. When he returned, in addition to seeing her with just a rag for a blanket, he also smelled the scent of cherry blossoms. With that scene, he began to feel uplifted, but quickly remembered the problem that made him return. This left him completely discouraged again. He had to first overcome the crisis in his own world. At dawn, the young girl woke up cheerful. It had been a long time since she had slept so well. While the young girl slept soundly, the protagonist could barely close his eyes due to his problems. Before they left, the young man asked the girl to make him new clothes, and then they set off for the academy. When they arrived, they were intercepted, as the first orc immediately recognized the protagonist. The protagonist was disappointed with the news, even though he had received a new shirt with a heart embroidered on it. The beast girl didn't know the rules. She had trained for a long time in caves without any guidance. Trying to comfort the girl, he said it was fine and that he would return for them later. And as they turned to leave, the orc said that the beast folk would never recognize him. Things got worse when the orc decided to speak ill of the beast girl who walked with the protagonist. Speaking badly of her, the young girl became visibly upset and thought she shouldn't be bothering him. Seeing that the orc was crossing the line and upsetting the girl who had done nothing wrong, he returned and grabbed that orc by the collar, demanding he put himself in his place, or else he would. Still holding that orc, he wanted him to apologize to the young girl immediately. The guy didn't care what he was saying and claimed that the girl was a disgrace to beast folk and didn't even have a name. While holding that man, the protagonist thought that all this started because the young girl didn't have a name. The orc told that human not to be so arrogant just because the Beast King had once taken interest in him. He said he might allow him to force an apology to that girl, but only if he passed the exam. After saying those mocking words, the young man intended to let him go. The young girl said he was right and shouldn't look for trouble just because of someone like her. Looking at that orc, he made it clear that the girl had a name, and it was Sakura. She thought the master had given her the name, so it would be best to step back. Before leaving, he made it clear to that beastman that once he passed, he would have to properly apologize. After saying those words, he asked Sakura to leave with him because they were going to level up. Arriving at a certain location, he said he would level up with those guys. The girl wanted to know why he had named her Sakura. He turned and asked if she didn't like it, saying she had only nodded out of politeness. The girl said she really liked it, that it wasn't like that at all. She wanted to know what inspired him to come up with that name. People said she was crazy, but who cares? He said it was a bit embarrassing and revealed that she always had a faint scent of cherry blossoms. Before he could finish saying what he wanted, the girl hugged him tightly from behind, making him embarrassed. She was visibly happy and emotional, repeating that her name was now Sakura. She thanked him several times until he, awkwardly, said it was nothing. Near a cave, he told her they were going to begin and enter. He said he wasn't a total beginner, but he was stronger than a goblin club. He said that while holding his dagger, he was satisfied. Compared to that heavy hammer, any weapon felt light. He saw that there were several animals there, each fiercer than the last. He asked Sakura to stay back and instruct as usual. He needed to gain experience. She got emotional every time she heard her name. He leaped at those monsters to try out his new dagger. The girl warned that those beasts were agile, so she recommended wide swings. Fighting them, the protagonist noticed they really were fast, just like the girl had said. Quickly, his veins bulged and he activated the strength of his body in certain areas, greatly increasing his physical resistance. The monsters, seeing that man fiercer than themselves, felt a chill run through them. After all, the young man faced the beasts, saying that with that level of combat, they wouldn't even be able to scratch him. The beast girl, watching, thought that those low-level monsters were no match for him. Quickly, he was handling them all. He knew that against agile enemies, speed was more important than power. With every movement that restricted the monsters, his experience level kept increasing. He estimated that with those three, the maximum combat power was 3.9 plus level 12. While fighting, he remembered the three fools who invaded his home and knew they were at a higher level. That's why he needed to close the level gap and acquire 4 abilities. He would also make that arrogant beastman bow his head. After a while, the group searched for new adventures to increase the protagonist's power. They found a beast that resembled a huge white wolf, properly armed with a gigantic sword. As soon as he saw the sword, The protagonist wished the wolf would drop it to the ground. From behind some rocks, he watched with shining eyes. The strength and length seemed perfect. When the young girl asked if he wanted the weapon, the boy replied no, he was just curious. She explained that the drop rate depended on rarity and that it was better to keep fighting until they got it. After hearing that, he understood better how that complex and mysterious system worked. That was a level 7 boss with 1500 brutal combat power. He noticed that the cold, dark light sword had a drop rate of 6%. He knew it would be hard to obtain it before reaching level 6, which was truly unfortunate. He kept observing the trading system, realizing there were more elements to it than he had known. There was only one scroll available for trade at that specific moment. He liked that, as it was a scroll that increased the drop rate by 30%. After reading the inscription, he thought he could use it since the number of enemies counted. He knew that if he traded 3 units at once, the combined probabilities would reach 96%. If it worked, he would instantly receive the desired sword as a blessing from the stars. With that, he received 3 scrolls, fulfilled the conditions, and had no more items left to trade. Using the scroll, he told Sakura they were now going after the monster's sword. He knew that with that sword, he could become increasingly stronger and unbeatable. He followed the huge red eyes of that wild animal with absolute focus. The beast noticed his approach and became completely enraged, first growling in anger. Then it swung its sword at the protagonist, leaving fragments in the sliced air. The protagonist noticed that the monster's sword had a chilling, freezing effect. Meanwhile, Sakura explained that the black fox was not only cunning but also very strong. Its weapon slowed down enemy movements and controlled the pace of the battle. She also said that the black fox was afraid of fire, and that was its weakness. With that information, he soaked his sword in oil, turning it into a flaming blade. Right after, he leaped onto the fox and attacked it with his roaring fire sword. When the fox saw the flames, it backed away, frightened, tucking its tail in fear. As the two fought, he demanded that the fox hand over the sword as payment. The young girl informed the protagonist that the monster's weak spots were the armpits and neck. Following her advice, he struck the weak points and shouted in rage when hit. His health bar dropped instantly, as if he had received a shock straight to the heart. By attacking the enemy's weak spots, his status automatically changed to coward. That allowed him to deal double damage while the enemy's aggressiveness decreased. With his blood boiling, the protagonist took advantage of the opening in combat. The young girl stated that in that state, it would be even easier to defeat the enemy. She also warned that he would need to dodge at key moments to survive. He followed her advice and thanked her for the essential tips with a determined look. He paused briefly when he saw the fox with its ears down and tongue hanging out. It showed extreme exhaustion and seemed about to collapse from physical strain. When he noticed the fox trying to rest, he prepared for the final attack. As he focused his strength for the finishing blow, his physical power surged overwhelmingly. Above the fox, he looked at it for a moment and delivered the brutal final strike. The young girl, watching from the side without interfering in the fight, analyzed her master's progress. She warned that it wasn't over yet and that something else could happen. So he prepared for a final airborne strike with strength and fury. He used the skill Heaven Shake and struck directly at the skull of the frozen fox. The young girl cheered excitedly, rooting for her master with contagious enthusiasm. The protagonist was also pleased with the fight, finding it incredibly exciting and epic. He almost forgot to use the scroll that increased the drop rate to 100%. Upon activating it, the item vanished from his hand, leaving only a glow and sparks. During the battle, he earned 3,000 experience points and obtained the desired sword. He had never seen such a powerful weapon before and was completely dazzled. He thought that with it, he could finally defeat the 3 enemies he hated so much. He was very close to reaching level 6 and achieving the perfect revenge. He asked Sakura where he could level up faster now. She suggested using his sharpening scroll, which accelerated the respawn of monsters. She mentioned that she had several of those scrolls and believed they would be enough. First, she suggested they take a break to recover their health and strength. Outside, they used the scroll and the cave was completely reset. The young pair were happy because they wouldn't need to wait any longer to evolve. They knew that some weapons had special effects that strengthened their wielders over time. With effort and constant dedication, they could find even better weapons. He also had the King's Hammer in his Divine Consciousness inventory. Although he could use it at full power only for a short time, it was his trump card. In the battle against the boss, the protagonist had managed to defeat it every single time. Now seeing him again, the fox was already trembling under his sharp gaze. He asked why, and the beast couldn't answer. It just trembled. Thus, he continued eliminating each of the fox's appearances with consistency. In that way, he progressed until he reached the long-dreamed level 6 in glory. Even if the fox wished to surrender, he knew he had to defeat it. When he finally reached level 6, he was ready to take revenge on the trio. The scene changed and the orc camp appeared, where they were discussing him. While they talked, one of the orcs was called by a mysterious figure. The figure warned them, saying the protagonist had already reached level 6. Recognizing him, the orcs were startled, unable to believe his rapid growth. He appeared before them, wearing new armor and a cloak, demanding the examiner. However, the threats started immediately, warning he'd suffer if he wasted their time. The protagonist declared that he met the required criteria and wanted to begin the test immediately. In addition, he wished to choose a skill from the Academy's vault to increase his power. The orc responded that it was all talk. Being level 6 didn't guarantee success. He had gone from level 4 to level 6 in just one impressive day. The stern man couldn't understand where such confidence came from in someone so young. The beastmen didn't know what had happened, but they were ready to begin the test. It was said that if he truly reached level 6, the test could begin. But the beastmen were known as a race of pure physical strength and endurance. They warned that if he passed, he would earn the right to access the Academy's skill vault. The test was simple and consisted of looking at and breaking a stone slab on the platform. However, he thought it all too easy and believed the evaluators were underestimating him. He figured the commander wanted to test him with a stone even level 10s would struggle with. Even so, they insisted the challenge was easy and demonstrated how it should be done lightly. Despite its apparent simplicity, they knew breaking that stone was a tough task. To prove it, the beastman himself decided to perform the test and serve as an example. He explained that even a level 20 warrior had to give it their all to break it. Visibly tired, he claimed it was easy and wanted to see if the boy would do the same. With unshakable confidence, the protagonist announced he would begin the test now. Meanwhile, the excited young girl wished him success with all her enthusiasm. The protagonist knew that thanks to his supreme physique, he could exceed his normal strength. As a precaution, he decided to adjust the enhancement and increase the force and impact of his fist. His ideal physique now focused 50% of his total strength in his right arm. Before he started, one of the beastmen tried to discourage him with mocking words. The protagonist ignored the negative comments and focused all his attention on the challenge. Mockingly, the beastman suggested that he at least scratch the stone before trying to break it. However, he not only scratched it, he destroyed the entire platform with a single blow. The two beastmen stood wide-eyed and speechless at the feat. As soon as the impact hit the platform, a strong wind blew in their faces. They were forced to shut their eyes tightly, trying to withstand the intense pressure. Scratching his head, the protagonist apologized for using too much force during the test. He said he had imagined something harder, and that's why he overdid the strike. Sakura was satisfied and hoped he would finally gain access to the skill vault. The two beastmen still couldn't believe he had broken the stone so easily. The protagonist asked if that counted as official approval for the proposed test. Annoyed, the beastman said he had failed because the stone already had cracks. The young man asked what the next test would be and waited for the new proposal. The beastman decided to apply another challenge involving the bending of iron bars. It was a test of strength and meditation where the participant had to bend a bar calmly. While boasting, he claimed that only beastman warriors could perform such a feat. However, the young man bent the bar with surprisingly effortless ease in front of the crowd. The beast was extremely furious with the unexpected and out-of-the-norm result. Even so, he claimed that he had failed again because now the bar was unusable. They looked for a strong warrior and said that if he lasted 10 seconds, he would be approved. While they were still discussing the test, he had already defeated the warrior with ease. To do that, he used 70% of the strength concentrated in his right arm with tremendous impact. Sakura was upset because there wasn't a single real challenge he couldn't overcome. Irritated, the protagonist said he had already taken 3 tests and demanded approval. His firm tone made the beastmen uneasy, but they admitted he had clearly passed. Pulling the young girl by the hand, the protagonist said the orc should apologize to Sakura. Reluctantly, the orc stated that a beastman warrior always keeps his promises. Bowing before the beast girl, the orc apologized for the previous treatment. Seeing and hearing that, Sakura thought it was a normal custom among warriors. The protagonist noticed her embarrassment and gently patted her on the head. He said it was normal to receive apologies and that she should accept them with pride. Hearing those words, Sakura lifted her head with courage and accepted the apology firmly. Sometime later, at the entrance to the skill vault, the orc explained a few rules. He said they could only take 1 scroll at a time from that sacred place. The protagonist found it ridiculous to take only 1, considering the effort involved. He was informed that if he exceeded the time limit, he would be forcibly removed and banned from returning. The orc explained that the Combat Academy was an important place for the entire region. He said that high-level sorcerers and mages had placed barrier seals on the vault. The beast girl commented that in higher academies, security was even stricter. They asked the protagonist if he was ready and warned him about any attempt at theft. They said he would have only 3 minutes to choose a scroll and exit the vault. As soon as he entered, the countdown began, and he understood the reason for the intense protection. Sakura confessed it was her first time entering that mysterious and sacred place. Everything seemed fragile, and she feared she might break something just by breathing or touching. Meanwhile, the protagonist was planning to use absolute duplication if he found something special. But it was hard to find a truly good skill among such a vast collection. Suddenly, a message appeared explaining how the vault system worked. Following the displayed instructions, he was able to understand how everything functioned. Now he needed to choose a skill to face the 3 enemies from his past. Sakura noticed the difficulty and mentioned that there was an interesting skill she could show him. It was called Wind Step, used for moving quickly and avoiding attacks. Additionally, it increased attack speed and was classified as a support skill for warriors. Only 2 minutes remained, and no skill resonated with his spirit. He found a counterattack skill that seemed useful in certain situations. It wasn't a bad choice, and he decided to keep it as a viable and strategic option. Watching the selections, Sakura felt that none truly matched her master. Now only 1 minute remained, and he knew he wasn't being efficient enough. He asked Sakura if she had stamina and energy potions stored in her magic pouch. She confirmed that she did, but didn't understand the reason for the sudden question. Meanwhile, he was channeling extreme power into his arm, planning a daring move. Outside, the beastman saw a bright light engulfing the sacred tower. It was so strong that everyone wondered what was happening inside the vault. The protagonist planned to break all the seals at once with absolute power. Glancing to the side, Sakura was impressed by her master's intensity at that moment. He was about to unleash the power of the divine hammer again, even knowing the enormous cost. He knew it would consume all his remaining energy and last for only a single final second. Something like multiple dragons made of electricity circled the skies above the tower. It was so astonishing that even the orc had to admit it was too much for a simple human. The protagonist held that hammer as if it were part of his own body, as if born with it. The young beastwoman couldn't believe that terrifying power, not even seeing it with her own eyes. After the dragons swept across the skies, inside, the protagonist held the hammer tightly. He was determined to break open all the scrolls at once, regardless of the consequences. When he channeled the hammer's power into the ground, a massive explosion occurred outside the tower. However, inside, the young man was completely exhausted from using the power of the divine hammer. The surrounding structure was severely damaged, with visible cracks throughout the hall. But what he wanted happened. He managed to open all the scrolls at once with his attack. Now sensing the energies around him, he could finally choose which one he wanted from them all. It was frightening even to his disciple, who felt the power flowing in a dangerous way. However, when the notification informed that the divine hammer had been deactivated, the young man felt intense pain in his arm. He quickly forgot the pain as he was absorbing the knowledge of all the scrolls in that place. Young Sakura feared the information might be too much for him to handle all at once. She was afraid that if he received all the knowledge at once, his brain might not be able to process it. Sakura asked her master to wait a moment, but he already seemed completely out of his senses. From afar, it was clear that all that power was burning his mind from the inside like arcane fire, and there were only 40 seconds left for him to choose a scroll before being expelled. But he felt that if he stayed like that 1 second longer, he would go completely insane. All the abilities he had seen so far were not enough for the goals he carried, until one scroll resonated with the protagonist's energy, who so badly desired greater power. The seconds were dropping fast, and the girl warned that time was visibly running out. He realized he would need Sakura's help and asked her to bring him a scroll, giving the exact coordinates. Quickly, she followed her master's request and found what he wanted without hesitation. The deadline was shrinking, but as she picked up the scroll, she noticed something was wrong and was surprised. The notification stated that the scroll was incomplete. It was merely a forgotten fragment. Descending quickly, she told her master the scroll was incomplete and that they needed to assemble the remaining fragments. She also said there was no more time and they had to leave before being expelled in the remaining 10 seconds. Saying that, she tucked the scroll inside her blouse as a way to protect it. The protagonist knew time was short, and even in great pain, he picked up the young girl in his arms and ran. The beastmen outside thought it strange for there to have been so much noise and now complete silence. Only 5 seconds remained. The countdown started in his mind from 3 when he saw a light flash by like lightning. At 1, they could barely see anything, as a whirlwind mixed with light engulfed everything and shrouded the area in dust. Even the protagonist thought it strange that he had managed to get out within the time allowed by the magical barrier. Later, outside the vault, the girl was wrapping her master's arm in bandages, as he had used too much vital energy. While she did that, the beastman noticed the fragmented scroll in the human's hand and became intrigued. That scroll contained a powerful combat spell capable of summoning a devastating electric current. The ability could be enhanced as the fragments were reunited into a single supreme technique. The beastman said he had heard from his ancestors that in the last 1,000 years, almost no one had dared to try learning that skill. When they did, their bodies would explode from the inside due to the overwhelming channeled power. However, one being mastered it 1,000 years ago, the Beast King, the strongest among the divine kings of the mountains. The protagonist wanted to know why such a precious skill left by the divine king had been thrown away like trash. The beastman replied that no matter how powerful it was, that didn't mean anyone could learn it easily. Holding the incomplete scroll, he raised his arm and declared that it was perfect for him, and no one would stop him. Calling Sakura, he said that the fragment was only the beginning of something grand, and that everything would be possible once they gathered the rest. As they were leaving, a beastman looked at Sakura and asked if she was the half-beast who was supposed to be executed in the past. He made it clear how much they despised her existence and suggested that the human didn't know her true identity. With a cold gaze, she said that none of that was his business and walked away firmly. She was visibly disturbed, clenching her fists and keeping a hostile expression on her face. As she walked away, the beastman said he wanted to see how far she could go with that attitude. Back at the inn, the protagonist praised her healing potion, saying it was incredibly effective, but tasted terrible. This one in particular seemed even worse than the others and nearly made him lose consciousness. Looking at Sakura, he commented that she had been acting differently ever since they returned from that dangerous place. She said it was just exhaustion, as the last few days had been difficult and filled with constant tension. He grew curious about the reason she had also been condemned and wanted to know if it was because of her life story. As he mentioned it, they both recalled that day, and the protagonist stated that she would be the next one to be protected. Raising her arms and trying to brush off the topic, she said it wasn't good to dwell on that. He remembered what the beastman had said and concluded that, to him, there was nothing wrong. Sakura was perfect. He believed that the scroll contained a powerful skill and that her body was the most suitable to master it flawlessly. He concluded that they should move on, as their next steps would take them even further. Sakura thought it was a beautiful day and seemed perfect for leveling up with determination. He agreed, but said he needed to do something before taking on any other mission. Looking at the ring on his finger, he noticed that the notification had arrived silently. The cooldown time between worlds had ended, and now everything was possible again. He knew that by mastering that skill, he could handle the three who awaited him. He told them to remember his face, because now that he had reached level 6, he would definitely eliminate them. He returned to his world and resumed the fight against the 3 adversaries as if nothing had happened. However, now he was strangely different, more confident, with far more ferocious attacks. He knew that before attacking, he needed to break the enemy's solid formation and activate his new ability. He opened his inventory, and his divine consciousness was already operating at a very high level. From there, he pulled out a massive sword he had acquired in a drop, feeling that he could finally reach the long-desired result. The enemies, seeing him draw that weapon seemingly out of nowhere, assumed he had a dimensional ring. They planned to defeat him and then divide the loot among themselves, but the protagonist made it clear that it was all their fault. They had started the fight without any reason, and now he would go all the way without hesitation. At that moment, everyone realized he truly was a warrior due to the intense aura he emitted. When he unleashed his power, massive bolts of lightning spread out, and the 3 realized, too late, who they were dealing with. He used an ability called Chainfall, and one of them was stunned to see that the boy could actually cast magic. The paralysis ability hit them hard, completely immobilizing their bodies and preventing any reaction. Now the protagonist walked slowly toward them with his massive sword in hand. Everyone realized they had completely underestimated him, and they didn't know what had happened to him during that interval. They felt frustrated but concluded that their only chance of survival was to run away immediately. One of them raised his hand in surrender, but had his arm torn off instantly. The protagonist stated that he would forgive no one for having tried to take his life without reason. His former instructor warned him that those men belonged to the Guild of the Mad Wolves. However, he didn't care which guild they belonged to. He would eliminate them either way. The bald one, realizing there would be no mercy, knew that if they escaped, they'd be doomed forever. Trembling, the bald man realized he would be next on the list and tried to buy time. However, he still had one last trick up his sleeve and declared that he wouldn't leave that world so easily. He threw several sticky bombs that clung to targets before exploding, despite their small size. The protagonist, aware of the imminent danger, raised his sword just as the mage triggered the explosions. Completely debilitated and shaking, the bald one believed those bombs had been his last hope. He thought he had finally gotten rid of the enemy and mocked him, saying he should train for another 10 years before facing them. But amid the smoke, someone was coughing in a hoarse, furious tone, defying all his expectations. The bald one couldn't believe it, unable to understand where that boy drew so much resilience from. The protagonist said that if it weren't for his strength and physique, he would have been done for at that moment. What saved his life was the Dark Goblin set and its supreme physique ability, which had activated at the right moment. Emerging from the rubble, he was now undeniably furious and declared that he would finish the 3 of them without mercy. An intense light shone, and the sound of destruction filled the entire surrounding area. After defeating them, with his goblin armor still active, he stated that he would never be safe as long as they remained alive. Even though they belonged to the Guild of the Mad Wolves, all of this only happened because his level was still considered low. He thought that world was disgusting, a place where the weak were easily devoured without any mercy. Then he saw a small package beside the rubble and became curious about what it could be. Upon examining it, he realized it was a dimensional ring forged from a special and valuable material. The ring allowed the user to store items in a dimensional space, with size varying according to its level. Now he was beaming with the unexpected discovery and felt like he had gained a decisive advantage. He believed an ordinary hero would never be able to get their hands on such an item, both because of the cost and the difficulty. He noticed the ring was already activating and syncing with his mana automatically. Upon receiving the message confirming successful activation, he made a strange expression but soon felt excited. Noticing the arrival of the heroes, he was satisfied to have left in time without being detected. In addition to the heroes, paparazzi also arrived, all eager for information about what had happened. He was impressed with the smartphone he had received from the instructor. Truly an incredible item. However, when the device rang, he was startled, as he had no idea who could be calling at that moment. He answered and heard the voice of his high school teacher, sounding worried on the other end. She said he should have sent a withdrawal notice and wanted to know what was going on. She wanted him to return to school, fearing he had abandoned his studies due to financial problems. She didn't want to see one of her students giving up on education because of difficulties that could be solved. He had always hated school, but the teacher said she understood and believed he could change his life if he continued studying. She stated she would try to solve the tuition issue so that he wouldn't have to worry about it. Upon hearing those words, he realized she didn't know he had become a powerful hero. She was the only person who had always cared about him, even without knowing what he faced daily. She said she would be his strength whenever he needed it, and asked him to think about it for himself and for his sister. He didn't like school because it held many bad memories, but after that conversation, something inside him changed. Feeling strengthened, he promised that the next day he would return to class and resume his life. Now everything seemed under control. He was already level 6 and had dealt with the problem with those 3. Elsewhere, someone received the news that the 3 had been defeated by a hero who looted all their belongings. The man with 4 rings on his hand was concerned to learn that the dimensional ring he had entrusted to them had also been taken. However, the thief was in for a surprise, as the ring had a tracking spell that had been activated beforehand. Because of that, the original owner already knew exactly where he was and what his next move would be. This man was the leader of the Mad Wolves, a level 21 warrior with a combat strength of 11,200. The order was clear and direct: recover the ring and bring the thief to him without failure. As promised to the teacher, the next day he and his sister were back at school, and she showed great concern for him. He walked slowly, and she kept pace with him, even though her movements were difficult. He told her she didn't need to worry so much, and that there was no reason to be stubborn. When she found out he had decided to resume his studies, she insisted on doing the same, despite her limitations. She didn't want to feel like a burden and thought arriving in a wheelchair would be too humiliating. Fortunately, her brother had bought crutches especially for her, which made her more comfortable. The crutches had been purchased with the money obtained from looting the 3 previously defeated opponents. The ring, though valuable, couldn't be sold, so he decided to use the lower risk items. He asked his sister to take it easy, that she didn't need to rush or stay too late at school. He said he would be there after class to help her down the stairs without difficulty. Meanwhile, 2 girls watched the brother and Karina from a distance, exchanging malicious comments. The dark-haired girl with a provocative look was chewing on a lollipop and wanted to know who Karina was, showing interest. The other replied with harsh and prejudiced words, saying that people of that kind should rot in the gutter. From the tone of the dark-haired girl, known as Nina, it was clear she intended to spread more poisonous rumors about Karina at school. She remarked that last time she had done the same and no one did anything, so this time would be no different. The 2 decided to leave, as Nina mentioned she had a date and couldn't be late. Meanwhile, the hero was in the vice principal's office, who didn't hide his displeasure at his presence. He said coldly that if it hadn't been for the teacher's insistence, he would never have returned to that school. Not knowing what to say, the young man simply thanked them both for the opportunity to study again. As soon as he and the teacher left the room, the vice principal revealed his true thoughts. He didn't care about those unwanted students and was only doing it to impress the teacher. He thought that since she was young and pretty, she might become his girlfriend, even though she had shown no sign of that. Shortly after, the hero walked beside the teacher down a long corridor lit by the morning light. She said she had helped cover part of the tuition fee so that he and his sister could attend school. She said that now they didn't need to worry about money anymore and could focus on their studies. The details would be discussed later, but she reminded him that he was now in the third year and exams were approaching. Seeing his excited face, she felt happy to realize how much he had changed since the last time. The hero reflected, surprised on how hard he had been working lately. He thought he should at least have acknowledged to himself that he had become a true hero. With that thought in mind, he headed to his classroom, ready to face the day. When he entered, a sudden and uncomfortable silence took over the room, as if time had stopped. The first to notice his presence was the class bully, who used to provoke him in the past. His partner, seated just in front, suggested they welcome him the same way as before, with mockery. They remarked that he had stopped paying the extorted amount, which was hurting their business. Mocking as usual, the bully threw a paper ball at him, thinking it was all very funny. But this time, the hero simply extended his arm and caught it in midair with ease. The two were shocked to realize that, even with his back turned, he sensed the object coming. Without fully turning, the boy looked over his shoulder, showing calm and determination. He called the bully by name and said they needed to talk in the bathroom later. The suggestion of settling things disturbed the bully, who saw it as a bold provocation. Soon after, the bell rang, and there would be a change of teachers, giving them time for the conversation. The bully arrived first and placed a friend at the door to make sure no one else entered. When the hero showed up, they began mocking him, saying he looked like a ghoul freshly risen from the underworld. They claimed he still owed them money for the time he was absent from school. He replied calmly, asking what they would do if he didn't pay anything at all. Seeing how composed he was, the bully started getting nervous about his demeanor. The bully tried to keep his attitude and threatened him, saying that if he kept that up, he would get beaten. When one of the boys tried to strike him, the hero caught his arm before the attack could land. Immediately, the others tried to attack him all at once, thinking they could overpower him as a group. However, he was no longer the same weak and intimidated boy from before. He was on another level now. With his divine gaze, he realized that none of them had the class or level to face him properly. He defeated them all in just a few seconds with fast and precise strikes, just to end the situation. The bully, seeing the others fall around him, froze and began to sweat cold with nervousness. He tried to stay composed, but the truth was that he was terrified of the boy's new presence. The boy, who used to take beatings in silence, now fought back with a steady, determined look. The pressure he exerted was so intense that the bully felt completely consumed by fear. When someone warned that the teacher was coming, they all decided to flee before getting caught in there. On the way out, the bully gave the hero a look of contempt and anger, but didn't have the courage to act. That look unsettled the protagonist, as he felt the bullies had learned nothing from the experience. Even so, he knew it could have been much worse, so he was satisfied with the outcome. Meanwhile, Karina remained seated at her desk, observing the commotion discreetly. She received a borrowed book from a kind classmate sitting in front of her. However, before she could say thank you, Nana appeared and slapped the girl's hand away. The classmate tried to explain that Karina wasn't feeling well and needed to borrow the book. Even so, Nana threatened her and showed her displeasure with Karina's presence in the classroom. She was furious because, during Karina's absence, there had been no one to exploit. The girl who lent the book trembled, saying she also had difficulties and no money. Without a shred of empathy, Nina commented that those things strapped to Karina's legs could fetch a good resale price. Hearing that, the girl trembled as she said her older brother had done everything he could to buy them. When the two heard the young girl trying to explain herself, they just kept blank expressions. After that, one of the girls began to mock her, asking if she could even walk without the crutches. Shaken and afraid, Karina replied that those crutches were far too important to her. Upon saying that, she was slapped across the face by the woman in front of her, who didn't like what she heard. Everyone witnessed the moment a defenseless person was put in that situation. Even the teacher had already entered the room and saw everything happening inside. Despite the teacher's presence, the student continued threatening Karina. While the class continued as usual, the girl was now tense and distressed. She thought she would have to run away as soon as class ended to avoid an encounter with Nana. In her brother's classroom, the lesson was ending and the teacher was wrapping up with a word of thanks. Right after, the teacher asked to speak with the protagonist before he left the room. She wanted to know if he was adapting well after being away for so long. She also asked if there was anything else she could do to help him that day. He responded that everything was fine, saying so with a gentle smile on his face. The teacher recommended that if he went through any difficult situation, he should come to her before acting alone. He thanked her for the sincere concern she showed without hesitation. Seeing that everything seemed fine, she said she wouldn't take up any more of his time. As she was already leaving, he said goodbye with a cheerful and genuine smile. But as soon as she walked away, his expression changed and became much more serious, especially when someone showed up in the hallway calling his name. It was the same guys from the bathroom, who now appeared wanting to apologize. They invited him to go somewhere else to talk more privately, and began walking down the hallway. The protagonist walked calmly while following the guy who was leading the way. From the look in the guy's eyes, it was clear he was plotting something in secret. They were planning to catch the protagonist off guard and take him by surprise. The one who had called him believed everything was going exactly as he had planned. But the sounds the accomplice heard didn't come from the leader. They came from the protagonist himself. He was fighting back with strength and determination, landing solid blows in return. When the accomplice looked back, he saw that the hero already knew he would be next, especially after the words spoken directly and with a threatening tone. Full of anger and determined to end it once and for all, the hero took action. With a precise kick, he threw the guy a considerable distance and kept moving forward. The others who were nearby ended up receiving exactly the same fate. Thinking of everything he had endured during his school life, now he defended himself. To him, it was all too simple, since all the enemies had average level strength. Even the leader who thought he was top tier wasn't prepared enough to face him. The protagonist stared him down with that cold, arrogant look of superiority. With just that gesture and a few sharp words, the bully realized he was in trouble. From the young man's firm and confident attitude, it was clear he wouldn't tolerate threats anymore. The protagonist knew that this guy needed to be taught how to respect others. He wouldn't waste another minute with that trash because he had to go find his sister. He knew that as a hero, he should stay away from certain kinds of trouble. Meanwhile, Karina walked as best as she could down the hallway toward the back gate. She was trying to escape before Nana and the others found her again. She thought that leaving through the back would keep her from being seen and allow her to go in peace. But when she reached the top of the stairs, she was pushed hard and fell down several steps. Her school materials fell from her backpack, and her face was scraped, especially her nose. At the top of the stairs, those responsible for the fall laughed loudly as if nothing had happened. Nina, the cruelest of them all, ordered the girl to remove the crutches from her legs. Even lying down and trembling, Karina begged her not to do that in desperation. But she would be completely ignored because Nina wanted to sell the crutches for profit. At the front gate, the situation was different, and Karina's brother was looking for her without success. He wondered where his sister could be at such a troubling moment. That was when a girl approached, asking if he was Karina's brother. He said yes, and she, a classmate of hers, brought important information. She said Karina had left through the back gate while class was still going on. Even though he found that information strange, the protagonist needed to confirm it for himself. He found it suspicious that his sister had gone to the back gate and started to feel something was off. He noticed that Haru seemed uneasy while speaking, as if afraid of something she didn't want to say. Regardless of everything, the most important thing at that moment was finding his missing sister. When he reached the top of the stairs, he wasn't sure if he truly believed Karina would be there. But as soon as he looked down, he saw the worst thing he could have imagined that day. His little sister was lying on the floor, scraped, barefoot, and visibly shaken. Seeing that scene, his expression changed completely. Overtaken by a dark look, he became even more disturbed when his sister lifted her head, revealing the bruises on her face. Trying to play down the situation, she asked why her older brother was in that place. Without her knowing, he activated his divine eye and analyzed the visible marks on her cheeks. He carefully walked down the stairs, noticing that her entire body showed signs of abuse. As he finished his analysis, he imagined how much pain she must have endured. Even injured on the floor, Karina forced a smile and pretended everything was under control. He knew her arms, back, spine, and waist were aching from the beatings. He calmly knelt down, gathered the scattered school materials, and placed them back in her backpack. He pretended to believe the story that she had simply slipped and fallen down the stairs. Despite everything, she seemed more worried about the devices she wore on her legs. Even knowing they were damaged, he told her they were fine, just to reassure her. Upon hearing that, she sighed in relief and said she was happy, even though she couldn't walk. Since she couldn't move due to the injuries and the broken equipment, he carried her. While on her brother's back, she looked up at the sky, painted in the colors of sunset. He asked if that view brought back any important memory to her mind. The day he'd carried her before had looked just like that, and now he realized how much she had grown. But that old memory wasn't exactly a good one, even though it felt like it had happened just yesterday. Since then, they had never been apart again, and she knew they had always stayed together. He promised he would never let her go through something so painful again. She knew he always did his best, which was why she didn't want to become a burden to him. After they arrived at their destination, he asked her to wait a bit, saying he would be right back. When she asked where he was going, he made up a story about forgetting something important. As soon as he turned his back, his expression shifted completely to one of intense rage. Far from there, the cruel girl who had tormented Karina was chatting casually with a boy. Meanwhile, Billy, Nana's boyfriend, asked if the devices could really be sold. He also wanted to know about Karina's brother and whether that might cause problems later on. The friend replied dismissively, saying he was just a janitor with no importance. Nana mocked the comment, saying that's why the two siblings made a perfect loser pair. The blonde girl commented that Karina used to be popular before her legs were broken in such a cruel way. That description caught Billy's attention. He thought the girl was pretty and had good posture. Nina felt a wave of jealousy after hearing her boyfriend's interest-filled words. He tried to justify himself, saying it didn't mean anything and she didn't need to get upset. He stood up and got close to her, saying that the next day she should grab the devices. The plan was to sell them and use the money to have fun somewhere with friends. What they didn't know was that the protagonist had heard everything and was quickly approaching. With a furious look, he walked with determination toward the three troublemakers. The three looked at the boy, who was approaching with steady steps and a deadly stare. Billy got irritated and asked who the idiot was, barging into the room uninvited. The protagonist, equally furious, asked if they were the ones responsible for Karina's injuries. The blonde girl instantly recognized him as Karina's brother, and sensing danger, Nina pushed Billy toward him. Trying to impress his girlfriend, Billy made offensive comments to provoke a fight. He began getting ready, thinking he would easily beat the new challenger. Karina's brother wanted to know if they thought it was okay to push a disabled girl down the stairs. Even after the accusation, Billy still had time to make stupid jokes. Nina suggested Billy should teach that nosy boy a lesson. But when Nina said they shouldn't waste time on a janitor, Billy felt insulted. Acting on impulse, he reacted aggressively and tried to punch the protagonist directly. Unfortunately for him, the attack was easily blocked and pain shot through his hand right after. The protagonist yanked the door shut with force, showing that he wouldn't be the only one involved in that fight. After locking the room, he activated his class, equipment, weapon, and ability with a fierce gaze. Before anything else, the protagonist checked whether the three had any combat power. However, he saw that all of them were ordinary, with no special abilities. Nina's only power was her sharp tongue, which she used to provoke others. Now she wanted to know what the protagonist was planning to do with them. Even so, she was being ignored, as he preferred to speak directly with Billy. Billy, drenched in sweat and aching all over, asked if he knew whose son he was. The blonde with the lollipop mocked, saying the boy deserved points for facing everyone alone. She said that, even though they weren't heroes, they weren't the kind of people he should mess with. But unfortunately for her, the protagonist had completely run out of patience for that act. A single blow was enough to send her flying an impressive distance. Nina, surprised and worried, called out to Vivian to see if she was still conscious. Watching the scene, it was clear that not even athletes had that kind of insane speed. As she shouted her friend's name, Billy tried to assert himself, saying it would be the last time. The protagonist looked at Nina and said he didn't see either of them as women. Billy tried to say something but was cut off by a quick and precise strike. The protagonist said he'd deal with him later and tossed him aside with ease. Screaming, Nina called for Billy, hoping he could get up. But it was too late, and she felt the hero's hands gripping her neck tightly. Even with her screams, he held her firmly and pushed her against the wall. With a glare full of rage, he seemed to be savoring every second of that moment. He gestured for her to be quiet, already knowing everything she had done. With eyes burning with fury, he made it clear he would never forgive what she had done to his sister. He said this while tightening his grip on her neck, which was already sweating in panic. If it were up to him, he would take it all the way, but he wouldn't stoop that low. He preferred not to dirty his hands with someone as petty as her. He made it clear that from that moment on, she was to stay away from Karina. He didn't demand an apology, just that she disappear from his sister's life. And he warned her that if she didn't, next time he wouldn't be so considerate. Faced with that, the woman nodded, trying to promise she wouldn't do anything again. After throwing her to the ground, the protagonist turned to her boyfriend, but first he picked up a metal ruler that had been lying nearby. Billy, lying down and trembling, said that ruler wouldn't be enough to beat him. The protagonist was disappointed that he had to fight such a talentless worm. If that guy were actually a hero, maybe the fight would have been interesting. As soon as the punishment began, Billy screamed that his father was from the Blue Cobra's gang. Upon hearing that name, the hero remembered the people he had faced at the hospital. They were the same ones who demanded payment for Karina's medical expenses. He even found it amusing, as he always seemed to cross paths with people he hated. He said that while pulling lightning and channeling energy straight into the ruler. Only at that moment did Billy realize he was facing a true hero. The ruler was charged with electricity, and he released it all into the enemy's body. He knew that with the ruler, the damage would be controlled, just enough to send a message. After delivering the shock, he simply dropped the ruler to the floor without any expression. Grabbing his backpack, he said this was their first and last chance to keep their word. He also demanded that they clean up the mess they had left in the classroom. Billy, even in terrible shape, still showed a bit of arrogance. The girl said they both needed a hospital, but he insisted they just needed to rest. But his expression changed when she showed him the marks left on her neck. Annoyed, he realized Nina was once again trying to influence his decisions. With eyes full of rage, he promised Nina that the guy would pay dearly for everything. He said his father wanted revenge, and this wouldn't end well for anyone. Nina was thrilled by the declaration, as Billy promised to bring his father into it against the hero. She went even further, saying his father would wipe the hero and his sister off the face of the earth. Meanwhile, Karina was sitting on a bench, anxious about how long her brother was taking. She felt sad, thinking that if she could take better care of herself, she wouldn't cause so much trouble, and she got scared when someone called her name in a familiar voice. It was her brother, who immediately apologized for scaring her like that. He told her that everything had been resolved and it was time to go home. Once again, the hero carried her on his back, and together they walked through the city streets. As he carried her in his arms, he promised himself that no one would ever hurt her again. With that thought, he departed for the other world, where he reunited with Sakura. She told him that while he was in the city, he could take part in an official mission. That was exactly what he wanted. War experience felt like an exciting game. They quickly arrived at the Beastman's city, located in the northern part of the continent. The protagonist was still at level 6 and was looking for ways to level up quickly. Seeing that there were various different Beastman tribes, the protagonist found it all quite interesting. Even more so because Sakura explained that among them were rare tribes, each with their own specialty. He noticed they were being washed, and the Beastman found it strange to see a human adventurer among them. Sakura asked the master if, in his homeworld, there were also several different tribes. She also mentioned that proud elves and noble beastmen were quite rare on that continent. By the time Sakura realized it, it was already too late. The protagonist was already speaking with other adventurers. As expected, he wasn't well received, as there was a local rule about keeping distance during greetings. He apologized for not knowing about this rule, but the two beastmen were already in a defensive stance. Sakura stepped in, stating that it was all a misunderstanding and asking them to stop. Seeing that she wasn't joking, the two were even surprised by her commanding presence. Even upset, they couldn't do anything in front of that high-level beast woman. So Sakura and her master stepped away, and she decided they shouldn't speak to other adventurers. The protagonist noticed that everyone around them seemed to be whispering, watching them with suspicion. Sakura knew what it was about, but chose to remain silent for a moment. Then she explained that it was because she was a half-beast and beastmen didn't like hybrids. A bit uncomfortable, he replied that unfortunately, discrimination existed everywhere. Reaching out his hand, he held hers, and the two left that uncomfortable environment together. It was a different world, where animals flew alongside their masters in perfect sync. Sakura explained that they couldn't accept any quests before officially registering, so the two went to see the creature responsible for registering new adventurers in that region. Interestingly, the one in charge was a woman who was half human, half beast with feline features. The Catwoman asked which of them wanted to register first as a new guild member. The protagonist stepped forward and said it would be him, claiming he was different from the rest. Receiving a form to fill out, he was instructed to write down his information and which guild he belonged to. He was impressed by the fact he was filling out an official document in this new world. Sakura explained that without registration, he wouldn't be able to get an adventurer badge to operate. The Catwoman explained that ranking started at iron, then moved to bronze and silver, all the way to gold. Looking at his starting iron badge, the protagonist found it a bit unexciting. Upon learning that one could hide their level, he wanted to understand how it worked in practice. Sakura explained that there was a method to conceal your level independently from the badge. Following her instructions, he focused and managed to hide his level on the first try. The Catwoman was impressed by how quickly he executed the skill. While they were still there, a group of beastmen showed up, demanding that he get out of their way. They went straight to the Catwoman, loud, arrogant, and rude in both words and actions. They demanded that she give them a new quest, as long as it was lower in difficulty. They also invited her for drinks, saying they'd cover the cost. She said there was an emergency quest with a good reward, but it had high difficulty. With the scroll in hand, she informed them it was a level 15 mission. Though intrigued, they said they'd prefer something around level 10 to avoid too much risk. She explained that there was a carnivorous shadow infestation attacking a local farmer's land. Although it was technically a level 10 quest, the number of enemies made them back off. That's when the protagonist stepped in, took the quest, and said he would handle the problem. Repeating the words he had heard before, he told those losers to get out of his way. When one of the beastmen tried to confront him, another held him back, reminding him of the area's strict rules. Unable to retaliate, They resorted to insults, saying he had just registered as an adventurer. Even so, the hero said he wasn't afraid and that they were welcome to test his skills if they dared. He knew that, with the help of the system, he could easily defeat a level 9 beastman. However, he worried that his iron badge might be a problem and lead to the quest being rejected. The Catwoman confirmed that they were right. New adventurers were often turned away. Upon hearing this, one of the beastmen saw it as proof that the protagonist should start from the bottom. Sakura turned and said they weren't going to do that, grabbing her master's arm before he lost his temper. Even as they walked away, one of the beastmen provoked her, saying her companion was just a half-breed. Already irritated, Sakura showed her gold badge and asked if that was enough to shut them up. The revelation left all the beastmen stunned and completely speechless in the face of her status. The protagonist could hardly believe that his companion had a gold badge this whole time. The Catro commented that Sakura should have said that from the beginning to avoid confusion. Now she trusted that the hero could accept the mission since she believed the requester would agree. It was curious as the beastmen were now silent and no longer dared to make jokes. Sakura told the master that the mission would be useful for leveling up quickly. To the cat girl, it was strange to see a gold-ranked adventurer calling that boy master with such reverence. Watching from a distance, she began to believe that guild might be interesting to follow. Leaving the place and heading toward the mission, Sakura warned that the area was full of enemies. The farm was dealing with an infestation of carnivorous shadow creatures that were causing serious damage. When the protagonist wanted to know more about the gold badge, Sakura revealed her journey. She said she joined the Adventurers Guild when she was very young and had stayed active ever since. He thought that living that kind of life from such a young age must have been hard for her, especially alone. When she heard that compliment from the master, Sakura blushed, feeling a mix of embarrassment and joy. When they arrived at the farm, Sakura warned that the opponents there wouldn't be easy to defeat. After seeing those monsters, he realized that even though they were level 10, they were large in number. Sakura said they were a horde of level 10 carnivorous shadow creatures and that people were trapped inside the building. She explained that, deep down, they were pure darkness and corrupted all living beings, driving them into a rage. She knew that originally they were slimes, but not the kind that just flopped around. The protagonist wanted to know if using thunder power would be a good option in that situation. He had brought the weapon precisely to increase his chances of leveling up during the mission. Sakura thought it would be better if he avoided doing that kind of thing alone from then on. She didn't want him risking his life just to level up. She wanted to be by his side during that fight. He understood, but still had 2 questions he wanted to ask her at that moment. He thought maybe it was about his level, as he was only planning to evolve enough to prepare himself. Sakura said that if she knew the answer, she would certainly help him without a second thought. The protagonist mentioned that he didn't know how strong the Beast King was or how strong he could get by then. She watched him closely, because she knew exactly what was on his mind. She said that, being honest, it seemed impossible for him to reach the Beast King's level in just 1 year. Her answer was a shock to him. He hadn't expected to hear something so blunt from her. She went on, saying it would already be a miracle and a great achievement if he survived until next year. He knew that the power he would have in that world was the same one he had in his own world as a hero. He explained that the level cap for adventurers was 100 and the Beast King was at level 92. He said the Beast King, the Human King, and the Elden King were the 3 kings, considered the peak of power for their races. The protagonist didn't believe the reflection was someone strong enough to be a symbol of power among the beastmen. He understood that the higher the level, the harder it was to reach the next one. Sakura said she knew her level 72 wasn't low, but even so, she had tried to increase it several times and failed. She said that no matter how much she thought about it, she couldn't find a method for him to level up quickly. He stayed silent, listening to what she had to say until he decided to speak. He understood her concerns and wondered if he was truly ready to continue there. She said she would stay with him and wanted him to do his best to evolve as much as possible within that year. The protagonist commented that he wasn't a regular adventurer and might be able to reach level 50 during that time, even if it seemed impossible. He thought it might sound strange, but he believed that, thanks to that ring, he was in that world. He believed it was the ring that raised him after the divine judgment and was also responsible for that incredible selection system. Sakura believed that her master would certainly become a legend because that's what she truly trusted in. Releasing sparks of electricity, he said he was ready and about to begin the battle. He had a second question for Sakura, and she was paying attention to what he wanted to know. He wanted to know, after fighting so many level 10 crawlers, what level she thought he could reach. She replied that, judging by the situation, she believed he needed to reach at least level 12 to gain any advantage. With that, he concluded he would reach level 12 in no more than a week. Meanwhile, the beasts he was supposed to face were terrifying, as they were disgusting creatures. They were blue, slimy beings with rows of sharp teeth in their mouths, so he asked Sakura not to get involved. From that moment on, he intended to use the system at full capacity during the battle. He thought that at his current level, using thunder power was the best way to achieve victory. Jumping toward the monster, he wanted to discover the exact location of the core. Sakura warned him to be careful, as getting hit could result in corruption by the creature. He realized that he had the ideal physique and could withstand the monster's attacks well. Now the challenge was to get close and land a direct, precise strike on the vital point. He found the situation odd, as he expected the cord to be in the creature's chest. He was impressed by the regeneration speed of those disgusting monsters. Meanwhile, the monster tried to attack him with its enormous open mouth. It opened its jaws wide in his direction, trying to swallow him whole in one go. Being faster than the enemy, he narrowly escaped that ferocious attack. In his next move, he had to use his sword with precision to avoid being devoured. The protagonist realized the creature wanted to swallow him whole and thought it had chosen the wrong opponent. He believed that monster was like an insect flying straight into a flame. He knew that to win, he needed to tear off the mouth of that repugnant slime. Sakura, watching from a distance, noticed that her master's power was truly incredible. She believed he could actually turn the impossible into something completely possible. After some time, he finally found the creature's core hidden under its tongue. He prepared to use his thunder power and annihilate the monster in one strike. Having located the core, he unleashed the thunder attack, which completely wiped out the monster's health. When he saw the destroyed core, he felt satisfied, having earned 300 experience points. He began to think the mission might not be as hard as it seemed, since his sword was already ready for the next ones. 30 minutes later, the mission had been fully completed. All the carnivorous darkness had been eliminated without a trace. What he gained from those monsters was little compared to medium-level ones. He needed to reach level 12 in less than a week, and then make it to level 20. Sakura was congratulating the master while holding her usual elixir. She mentioned that she still had 4 vials ready for them to use when needed. The protagonist knew Sakura had bought the thunder oil before they arrived in that place. She explained that the item wasn't cheap and that she used all her money to purchase it. He said he'd try to fulfill more requests to earn money from upcoming missions. He was so focused on leveling up that he hadn't even thought about how essential money was. Sakura explained that, in that world, it was normal for people to ask for help when something valuable was lost. After completing the mission, the Adventurers Guild would calculate the reward. With a sparkle in his eyes, he thought Sakura seemed like a devoted and trustworthy wife. She believed the leader of the carnivorous darkness was hiding in the food storage warehouse. Suddenly, a beastman appeared, demanding to know who they were to invade the farm. The rough-looking man claimed to be the owner of the place and asked if the two were adventurers. He showed contempt at seeing a human and a half-human stepping on his land. He revealed that he had already called another team to take care of the problem. One of the adventurers commented that the rumors about the cardialis had already spread. They wanted to know who the two were since they had accepted a guild request without prior notice. The protagonist could only think about the fact that the cardialis was a boss drop. The farmer confirmed he had sent a request to the guild, but didn't expect such a fast response. The second team declared they wouldn't let the two interfere between them and the cardialis. Wielding his giant sword, he looked at Sakura and asked what the cardialis was. It was a rare item that, after purification, could connect with areas overtaken by darkness. He thought that if it was that valuable, he couldn't afford to let it slip away. The farmer asked both teams to stop the conflict and resolve the misunderstanding. Part of the request had come from the guild, the other from him personally, so both had rights. Sakura tried to convince the farmer to let them in first, as her master needed it. Both groups wanted to go in first since they were summoned by the original requester. The rival group was level 12 and wanted to show strength in front of the human and the half-human. Sakura warned her master that the opponents were well prepared, but she trusted in his victory. The protagonist made a bold proposal. He wanted to enter the place alone and fight the boss. To convince them, he revealed that he was only level 6, and that if he lost, he'd forfeit the request. Upon hearing that, everyone fell silent, as if they couldn't believe what they had just heard. The beastman laughed loudly, saying he should be at least level 18. Even being mocked, the protagonist remained calm and determined. Sakura wanted to be sure the master knew what he was doing there. He winked at her, saying she needed to trust his decisions. She fully trusted the master and knew the power he held. Still laughing, the rivals let him go ahead, thinking he posed no real threat. He simply gave a calm smile, already planning to prove who would truly be defeated without mercy. The goat of the group noticed that the man's aura had completely changed. Upon entering and standing before the monster, he wanted to know if that was the powerful opponent Sakura had mentioned. He was now interested in claiming the legendary item called cardialis. He stayed calm in front of the gooey creature with many arms and a single eye. Outside, the adventurers warned that the boss was a level 14 shadow monster. They told Sakura that level was too much for the master, even if she didn't believe it. They warned her to prepare to recover the master's lifeless body. Sakura gave such a fierce look that it forced everyone to immediately fall silent. She intimidated all of them without saying another word, just through her presence. The protagonist thought the monster's weakness was probably the same as regular carnivorous shadows. As he approached, the creature thrashed and drooled, hungry for human flesh. He knew he had to defeat it quickly and summoned his divine hammer. The hammer appeared glowing in his hands, with a power that seemed to challenge the heavens. He thought that if he missed, he would be vulnerable, as the power demanded a lot from his body. The monster charged, and he charged even harder. With the thunder hammer activated, he soared into the sky right in front of the creature's gaping mouth. He knew that if he missed the strike, he'd be swallowed by the slimy thing. The impact was so intense that outside, dragon-shaped blue lightning cut through the sky. The sky's light changed just like it always did when he used that divine and devastating power. Sakura, upon seeing the flash, realized he had used the hammer and would now be weakened. Even though everyone was in shock and didn't understand what had just happened, she ran to rescue him. Among the rubble, she shouted desperately, searching for the master lost under the debris. Suddenly, a thin, weak arm lifted, pointing out his location. Sakura found him there, weakened but holding the cardialis like a precious trophy. After she managed to rescue the master, they returned to speak with the catgirl and claimed their reward. When the catgirl said she had managed it because she was gold ranked, Sakura thanked her but explained it was the master who did everything. The catgirl, looking at the very weakened protagonist, couldn't believe he could have pulled that off. Sakura explained that he was the one who defeated the monster, which was why he looked so exhausted. As the two talked about him, the catgirl, no matter what Sakura said, refused to believe it. However, at one point, the protagonist returned to his normal physique, now looking strong and muscular. Now he wanted to know if Sakura had learned anything about the cardialis. The catgirl was surprised to notice that the protagonist had managed to get a drop like the cardialis. She said she would need a shaman in that city. She needed a recommendation. She wanted to request a purification. The catgirl agreed that the cardialis definitely needed to be purified and infused with a shaman's mana. She pointed out where the guild was and said she would write an identification letter for them. The protagonist wanted to know more about the shaman exam, so even shamans had a ranking system. She explained that shaman was an honorable title, just like pharmacists and awakened elves. They weren't just able to make valuable medicines, some could even influence level caps. That made the protagonist interested, as he intended to level up faster. The world had to learn to respect the terrifying and influential power of shamans. The protagonist thought all of that was incredibly fascinating. After the catgirl gave them a letter of recommendation, it would be easier to purify the cardialis. Sakura, letter in hand, thanked the catgirl for helping with their mission. Now they needed to go to that guild, and there was a huge line at the entrance. Seeing that, Sakura noted something different was going on that day. Specialist families had gathered. While they waited in line, they were observed by everyone there. She asked the person in charge if they could request a purification for a cardialis. That beastman said it wouldn't be possible that day since it was exam day. Only those taking it could enter. Sakura apologized, but said she had a letter of recommendation from the Adventurers Guild. Being rude, he said it didn't matter who the letter was from. The exam was more important. The protagonist, upset with how they were treating Sakura, said he wouldn't leave because they had a recommendation. He made it clear that it didn't matter how many days passed. He wouldn't be allowed in until the exam was over. The young woman noticed that her master was very angry and asked him to let it go, that they would resolve it calmly. When a blue shaman arrived, he asked why things were such a mess. His direct subordinate apologized to President Dove for the disturbance. One of the beastmen said those rude people had shown up on exam day to request the purification of a cardialis. That's when the protagonist asked if he was the person in charge, because he had a letter of recommendation from the guild. The beastman, seeing that humans speak to the president in such a manner, became furious. Amidst all that chaos, he was thinking that he didn't have time. He needed to level up. In response, the president said he would give a bonus and take appropriate measures. Not wanting trouble, the protagonist asked the president what the requirements were to take the exam. As soon as he said that, everyone present burst into laughter, thinking he must be joking. The president said that one had to at least have the aptitude of a mage, as that was the essence of a shaman. He said that was fine if it required being a mage, raised his hand to the president, and said he would borrow the staff. That request took the president by surprise. Of course, the beastman next to the president was stunned by his audacity in asking for something so important. The protagonist wanted to borrow it to prove that he met the qualifications. The president thought it was interesting. He wanted to see how a warrior could prove his worth, and so he lent it. Sakura whispered quietly, asking what her master planned to do. Sakura knew that whenever her master said he would do something, he always achieved it. The beastman said that since the president had lent him the staff, he now had to prove himself, and that was exactly what the protagonist intended, to demonstrate his power. Still, the beastman looked at him with disbelief, thinking he was acting strange, but the protagonist knew very well what the beastman's weakness was and struck him on the nipple. Doing that caused the beastman to make a strange noise and strike an odd pose, but the move was enough for the protagonist to absorb his abilities. Since he didn't need to limit himself to just one class, he could theoretically become anything. Among various powers, he found one more interesting than the others, and so he chose it. Then the glowing skill was completely duplicated. Now the beastman looked at the protagonist with different eyes. He knew that a mage could use magic with a staff, so he asked just to confirm, if he used magic, would that qualify? The president, seeing the magical waves, knew that after all, he was not just a warrior. He asked Sakura to close her eyes, and she immediately placed her hands over her face. The protagonist raised the staff and began creating a rapidly spinning vortex. The president merely raised a small barrier to protect himself. He created only a small barrier because, although the magic was bright, it was just enough for a standard adventurer. In the first test, he was asked if he wanted to increase his powers, and he accepted. With that, the demonstration became even more intense. Even the fragile barrier that the goat president had created couldn't protect him. He had to cover his face with his hands like Sakura to shield his vision. The flash lit up most of the area, making it clear to everyone that the protagonist could also be a mage. The president asked if now he was qualified to take the Shaman exam. Seeing all that brilliance, he said the protagonist was eligible and acknowledged his power. In the exam room, everyone was murmuring that it was absurd for humans to be allowed to participate too. It was definitely the first time this had ever happened, the beastman stated. The protagonist felt like everyone was looking at them as if they were enemies. After Sakura told him that all the fuss was because he was the first human to take the exam, he could barely believe that was the reason behind so much drama. Still, he whispered to Sakura that there was no way he wanted this much attention. He just wanted to purify the cardialis. Meanwhile, the beastman said he didn't disagree with President Doug's decision. The beastman speaking with the president was also a northern shaman and the vice president of the association. The reason for lending his staff to that human was to see if he could make potions. Since that person had shown the president his magical power, he had caught the goat's interest. He had only seen such genius-level potential once before in the shaman Kevin. Even so, the vice president thought it had to be a joke to compare that human to that young genius. The goat had his own point of view. He thought Kevin's new disciple might be someone formidable. The vice president said that even Kevin publicly praised her, saying she was a genius. Even though Fulin was very young, everyone considered her the new genius, especially for being Kevin's apprentice. Many believed that being near a genius like her, if he passed the exam, he could consider himself lucky. The catgirl, listening to it all, thought those people were too loud and weak. That's when the vice president asked everyone to take their positions based on their numbers. The protagonist told his partner that he was number 15. She wished him luck and said she'd wait outside. Looking at the paper in his hand, he noticed the number was also written on the ground, so he followed it. Standing in front of his number, he noticed he was beside a beast woman who was looking at him differently. Thinking the woman was like his companion, he decided to introduce himself. But when she replied, she said a human taking a shaman exam must just be seeking attention. With that, he realized she was nothing like Sakura, who was sweet and kind. The president quickly said that everyone should already be in position for the exam, as their abilities would be tested. When the structure began to shift and a workstation appeared, it startled the protagonist. That boosted the ego of the girl nearby, who thought anyone who didn't know even a small detail shouldn't be there. Making a strange face, the hero figured that girl should just leave him alone. The refining station, used for potion making in that world, was still quite old-fashioned. The vice president began announcing the details of the upcoming test. With that, he struck his staff on the ground, transmuting magic. As he did, a large circle appeared, protecting both him and the president. The other participants watched closely to see what was happening. Now the paper he had received made some sense to the protagonist. He knew what the test was. To complete it, he had to make 3 basic potions, observing how the other participants behaved. As he thought about that, the goat president said the first challenge was to select materials on the refining table. The protagonist observed that many of the participants didn't know what to do when faced with so many ingredients, so he noticed that several of them weren't sure what to choose, given the wide variety. However, the girl next to him believed it was normal for a mage to make a potion using pre-prepared materials. That caught the protagonist's attention, and he began to pay close attention to everything the girl was doing. She was full of herself, calling everyone else weak for not being prepared. He watched how she selected and prepared all the ingredients with great confidence. With everyone watching her, she had to fulfill her master's requirement of finishing in first place above all others. The vice president observed and thought that this was exactly what one would expect from Kevin's disciple. With great knowledge, she was able to mix and prepare her magic skillfully. She was extremely calculated and well prepared. The protagonist noticed that she had a sharp tongue, but was clearly gifted and respected. Because of that, he chose his new mission, to copy everything she was doing, and activated his divine eye. While the president and vice president talked about Kevin's perfect judgment in choosing such a meticulous girl, she continued making her potions under everyone's watchful eyes. The president knew that the next step was the most important. She was preparing for refinement, the most crucial and defining part of her magic. The fusion of materials with magic tested someone's magical grade and power. The president believed that if everything went well, Fulin would be the one to take first place. When he looked at the hero, he didn't think much. The boy was quiet, and that caught his attention. He noticed the protagonist hadn't started yet and wondered what he was doing, thinking he should begin soon. Meanwhile, his opponent was already working on solidification, performing her magic with mastery. The president announced that once they finished, they would need to wait until the end of the test for their work to be reviewed. That news didn't sit well with the participant who had already finished her preparation. She didn't understand why she had to wait for all those losers, considering she was at the top. While the protagonist watched and managed his divine eye, she asked what he was observing. He replied that it was nothing and thanked her, but she said she didn't have time to waste. After that, the hero began manipulating his ingredients, which drew the attention of a few people. A message appeared asking if he wanted to optimize the analyzed actions, and of course he accepted. With that, the correct materials were automatically selected and would be automatically crushed. Everyone watched as a powerful refinement process was underway. The vice president noticed that he was selecting and grinding simultaneously before refining. It really seemed like he was approaching the genius level of Master Kevin. While Sakura waited outside, she hoped the hero was doing well. Even though she was very worried, she trusted in her master's talents and hoped he wouldn't face any trouble. Meanwhile, he continued making his potion with the help of the divine eye, copying everything he had seen from his companion. With a meticulous gaze, he understood there was more to potion making than just preparation. It was about finesse. He knew he was still in the refinement stage, so he needed to perform the infusion carefully. Now, watching his preparation closely was Fulin, who feared being surpassed. She worried she wouldn't be able to fulfill her promise to her master of achieving first place. Everything was going so well that it even caught the president's attention, who already compared him to the genius Kevin. The vice president couldn't believe how a mere human could have such skill in separating and fusing all the materials. Things were going so smoothly that even the president was speechless at the protagonist's brilliance. He didn't even know such classifications existed, since they weren't like the mass-produced uniform capsules. But he knew he needed to surpass that girl, who had probably made a strong potion, so he needed to make something even better. He had doubts about how he could raise the potion's grade to refined. He thought maybe it was affected by strength and magical attributes, but now he had to figure out how to alter them. Stuck at his current strength, he was having trouble, and the president and vice president noticed his hesitation. Fulin, watching him, felt that something was wrong. If he finished the refinement like that, the solidification would fail. Everyone was warning that the human's refinement was not yet complete. When someone tried to approach him, Fulin became furious and blocked anyone from getting close to him. The protagonist was struggling to change his attributes. He thought that if he borrowed the power of the Divine King's hammer, he might be able to manipulate the lightning attribute. He had no other choice but to try. The president noticed that the magical waves were stable but wouldn't last much longer. What no one knew was that the hero was ready to summon the divine hammer. His power intensified, and he silently asked for the hammer to resonate and grant him its strength. That power finally flowed into the protagonist's body, and everyone noticed the difference. It was exactly as he had imagined, as the thunder attribute gave him a few precious seconds. While raising the staff, now glowing in his hand, the potions were being refined correctly. With that, the basic energy potion was completed. Even he hadn't expected that altering attributes and using magic would be so exhausting. The vice president thought that, despite being unstable, he had still managed to refine and solidify the potion. Even the president didn't know exactly what he had done, but everyone was impressed, watching his actions closely. The order was given for everyone to stop working, as anyone breaking the rules would be disqualified. The president began inspecting some potions to make proper evaluations. Upon analyzing one potion, he commented that some participants had succeeded, which pleased him. The vice president examined a potion that was cloudy and smelled burnt. When that participant was disqualified, he was disappointed. Several had achieved good results, while others didn't even reach the minimum score. After assessing many participants, it was Fulin's turn, and the vice president asked about the genius Kevin. The participant thanked him for the concern and said her master was doing very well. Just by sensing the overflowing fragrance, it was clear the potion was very promising. The aroma was rich and long-lasting, and the potion was pure. It was undoubtedly a level 3 potion. She was satisfied because she hadn't disgraced her master. Kevin had taught her well. Everyone had expected that result from Kevin's disciple, as her talent and skill were unmatched. Even the protagonist was impressed when she managed to create a level 3 potion. Catching him off guard, the president said he would personally evaluate the protagonist's potion. He noticed that the boy lacked confidence and figured at best he had managed a level 4 potion. However, contrary to what the vice president believed, when the president was ready to evaluate it, the moment he opened the vial, everyone noticed an overwhelming power. Even the protagonist found the lightning fascinating, while the president considered it a supernatural phenomenon. The vice president had never seen a potion cause a supernatural effect before, which meant it had to be at least level 2. The disciple found it impossible, as only someone on Master Kevin's level could create a level 2 potion. Everyone awaited the president's evaluation of the human's potion. He noticed the richness of the aroma, the purity of the potion, and even the supernatural phenomenon. With that, he told the vice president that they had been wrong. They began to consider that the human boy might be in existence even more impressive than the genius Kevin himself. Everyone believed that, without a doubt, he had taken first place in the Shaman exam. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the Shaman Association, Sakura waited anxiously for the master's return. Everyone looked at her with judging eyes until, from within the crowd, the master appeared. The protagonist waved his arms to show her where he was. She was happy that he had come back and asked how it had gone, since it felt like a long time had passed. The protagonist said he had been successful and placed first, which was why he came to get her. Everyone nearby heard the human say he had earned first place in the Shaman exam. He was now there with Sakura and would take her with him to purify the cardialis together. With that, he could gain a few levels, and he was already accompanied by the president and the vice president. For the purification procedure of the cardialis, the vice president commented that he was lucky. It would be performed by the president himself. When asked by the vice president who had taught him magic, he answered that he had learned on his own. Hearing that, both the president and the vice president felt a bit mediocre for not having been able to do the same. They asked him to follow them to the place where the purification would take place. As they walked, Fulen, defeated, walked with her head down. She was terribly depressed and trembling, hoping Master Kevin would forgive her for losing to a weak human. However, when Sakura heard Kevin's name, she immediately turned around. Looking at his disciple, she made an extremely fierce expression. Seeing the hostility on Sakura's face, the protagonist asked if everything was alright. Smiling, she said nothing was wrong. She had just gotten distracted for a moment. It was obvious the two knew each other and didn't get along. The ritual was being prepared with all the necessary elements to purify the cardialis. All that could be heard was the recitation of the spell conducted by the president, using a spell of his own. Vice President Pig explained to everyone that the cardialis was filled with dark energy and therefore required a specific spell to be purified. Sakura told the protagonist that shamans were a kind of mage, and that the president was one of the most powerful among them. While they talked, President Goat continued the ritual steadily, channeling his magic. The purification process was nearing its end, and the president handed the refined mineral to the protagonist. He explained that this cardialis was of medium grade, and fortunately, would provide even greater experience in the dark zone. The president mentioned that, in his experience, a group would usually need at least one tank, 2 warriors, and a few mages. However, the hero declared he would enter alone, which surprised everyone. Sakura said that when her master was determined, he accomplished incredible feats. Still skeptical, the president and vice president asked if he truly intended to challenge the dark area without company. Shortly after, the cardialis was activated and the dark area was open for use. The president and vice president informed the protagonist that he would have a limited time inside the zone. The protagonist, confident, said he would only come out after defeating many monsters and increasing his level. Sakura, concerned, handed him some potions, saying she had obtained them from the dark carnivore. The hero always saw Sakura as someone kind and caring, and now, with the potions in hand, he could last longer in battle. President Goat grew uneasy when he saw the protagonist returning the magic staff. He didn't know how he would use magic without it. He was even more surprised when the protagonist revealed that, in fact, he wasn't a mage, but a warrior. He then pulled from his inventory a sword he had acquired by defeating an enemy leader. Not wanting to waste more time, the protagonist activated the cardialis and prepared to level up as quickly as possible. The vice president and president were astonished. They had believed he was a mage, but now saw him as a warrior ready for battle. Smiling, President Goat commented that the young man had grown a lot and that he was eager to see his performance. Now inside the dark area, the protagonist knew he had a total of 12 hours. As soon as he arrived, he encountered level 10 beasts. Knowing his level was lower, he observed from a distance and waited for the right moment to strike. He couldn't underestimate the enemies, so he decided to eliminate them as quickly as possible. With determination, he launched his attack using the full force of his thunder power. He believed he could finish everything with his lightning chain, as the enemies had no defense against that kind of attack. Quickly, he eliminated most of them and left the remaining ones with low energy. With that, he gained 500 experience points and realized that area was extremely advantageous for leveling up. Each enemy granted him the equivalent experience of a boss from his original world. Excited, he continued exterminating multiple monsters along the way, until he encountered a much stronger enemy whose mouth was lined with rows of sharp teeth. He noticed that the monster wasn't affected by the paralysis from his chain of lightning. The enemy's speed increased drastically, and if the protagonist had been any slower, it would have been fatal. This put him on high alert, focusing all his attention on the opponent. At that moment, he unlocked a new vision ability, allowing him to better analyze the enemy's body. He realized that, besides being strong, the monster also had a certain level of intelligence. Knowing he had to finish everything in a single blow, he decided to modify his physical strength, focusing 60% of his power into his arms. His goal was a precise sword strike, ensuring the promised 600 experience points. If he could maintain that pace, he would reach level 7 in that very attempt. Meanwhile, outside, Sakura waited anxiously alongside the president and vice president. President Goat commented that he had never heard of anyone entering the dark zone alone and returning alive, unless they possessed exceptional power. Sakura stated that her master was the most exceptional of them all. Vice President Pig also remarked that it was the first time he had seen someone challenge a boss from the dark area alone. These comments made the Beast Girl visibly nervous. Even if it seemed impossible to them, she knew her master's true potential. Meanwhile, the protagonist continued his battle. Despite the difficulty, he pushed on with determination, though he was already feeling exhausted. He decided to pause for a moment to drink Sakura's potions, which served for recovery and healing. The potions were incredibly effective, even though the taste was terrible. After drinking them, he felt revitalized and ready to continue his path of evolution. The sudden silence made Sakura even more worried. The president noticed her nervousness and explained that he was uneasy too, unsure if the human boy would return safely. He remembered the moment when the young man claimed to be a warrior, despite everyone believing he was a mage. To the president, he was a warrior who only participated in the Shaman exam to be able to purify the cardialis. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from within the dark dimension. The president grew more concerned, as the noise indicated an intense battle. Sakura, however, remained calm, because as long as the thunder continued to rumble, her master was still fighting. She recognized that sound as the power of thunder being used by him. Inside the area, lightning lit up the darkness as the protagonist continued his assault. Multiple enemies were eliminated at once, raising his experience by 1,200 points. Although a bit tired, he had now reached the deepest parts of the dark area. The next challenge would be the final boss. He was already standing before the gate that led to the boss's chamber. Knowing the battle would be tough, he decided to rest a bit before entering. To do so, he sat down and drank some potions to recover. However, the taste was awful, and he still couldn't get used to something so disgusting. Despite the unpleasant flavor, Sakura's potions were extremely helpful to the protagonist. After drinking them, he was fully recovered and now stood before the monster. Confident in his power, he slowly approached the final boss, which was massive and extremely muscular. With red eyes, the creature simply stared at the protagonist. The hero, veins protruding on his face, observed that this boss's level was the same as the carnivorous darkness. Noticing that even with equal levels, this one was more intimidating because it was a boss, he increased his physical power. The boss, wielding a sword wrapped in a chain, launched into an attack with incredible speed. But the hero was ready and managed to block the fierce strike. In addition to being fast, his power was incredible. The hero could feel it from the difficulty of holding back the sword. The boss also possessed a wave power that he was emitting toward his opponent. That power was the ability to terrify enemies. On top of that, he used a shock ability, usually meant to restrict movement. The human standing before the boss couldn't move, no matter how hard he tried mentally. But as expected from the protagonist, he gathered all his power to break free from the paralysis. As soon as he felt the paralysis fading, his eyes overflowed with power. He believed the energy of the Ring of Infinity may have helped block the abnormal status. While wondering if it was an illusion or reality, the boss just stopped and observed with a strange look. That's when the hero, with a smile, told the boar that he wouldn't die so easily. Now the two stood face to face, restarting their clash with swords. The boar, looking possessed, was shocked to see the human overcome the slowing effect. Upon hearing the voice of that strange boar, the protagonist was surprised. He didn't know it could speak. He found it strange that darkness could talk. He had thought darkness was made up only of beasts incapable of communication. However, that mutant boar claimed that any being of darkness was a powerful existence. When he realized he was about to be attacked again with the same technique, he thought that if he had the black goblin armor, he'd have the upper hand. But he had left it in the original world, and meanwhile, the boss was preparing for another attack. With that, the aura around them turned red. The hero managed to block the strike, but his weapon's durability decreased. During the clash, he noticed that the opponent's blow could obstruct his vision. The next attack came too fast. He thought he might not be able to dodge in time. Luckily, the blade passed very close but didn't hit the hero's body. At the last second, he managed to gather the strength to move, but realized he hadn't been fast enough. He had been struck and had no medicine to stop the bleeding. He needed potions or magic. He knew that without treatment, he'd grow weaker by the second, so he had to finish the fight before collapsing. He gripped his sword tightly, ready to deliver the final blow. The enemy simply watched the human's strange behavior. Little did he know that he was about to be struck full force by a thunder attack. He didn't understand why the enemy didn't dodge, only blocked with his sword. He did so using just one hand without showing the slightest effort. As a result, the thunder hit only the ground, causing no damage to the enemy. The boar stared seriously at the human before him. Meanwhile, the hero, eyes wide, couldn't understand how the boar wasn't struck by the lightning. Getting more serious, the boar revealed its intention to destroy his opponent. Upon hearing that the boar intended to use him as a sacrifice, the hero didn't understand what he meant, but the enemy simply launched into the air, preparing a much stronger attack than before. When the massive strike landed, waves of dust and electricity filled the area around them. With effort, the protagonist dodged, but due to the power of the attack and his low resistance, he was thrown back. After the colossal attack, the boar continued to hurl insults at the protagonist. In a mocking tone, he declared that all weapons were useless against the darkness. Standing amid the chaos, he waited for the dust to settle to confirm his victory. However, upon hearing something and noticing a silhouette emerging, he wanted to know what was happening. The beast was stunned to see its own attack being replicated by a mere human. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. That attack was exclusive to the darkness. But from within the red mist, the protagonist declared that when he approached the beast, he managed to copy its technique. He knew it was reckless to use such a strong power, but now he could return the attack and the damage he had suffered. Now that he had the power of physical sacrifice, it would last for 1 minute, and he needed to act fast. Before him, the boar boss wanted to understand how the human was able to use an ability exclusive to the darkness. But with limited time, the hero couldn't waste a single second explaining his tactic to the enemy. So before taking the next step, he simply said it was a piece of cake. When he lunged at the darkness, he vanished from the enemy's sight for a moment. The enemy realized that the hero's speed and agility were extreme, just like the dark power he was now radiating. The battle continued fiercely, as the protagonist now had the same strength the enemy had demonstrated. Even so, he believed that even copying the darkness's sacrifice wouldn't be enough to win with brute force alone. The hero didn't care what he had to do. He just wanted to defeat the enemy within the remaining time. To the opponent, that sounded like a hilarious joke, but the hero wasn't joking. The darkness warned that the hero was forgetting something. He hadn't yet activated the true sacrifice. He was about to reveal his authentic power to that weak and insolent man. After activating it, he took on a completely different form, with bulging muscles and a reddish tone, revealing that the sacrifice was the sun itself. Noticing strange movements from the hero, the enemy began watching closely to understand what was happening. Forming a storm of thunder and lightning, the protagonist announced that he couldn't forget that boar. He also hadn't forgotten that the boar could neutralize his terrain just by using the weapon it carried. Only at that moment did the boar understand the protagonist's tactic. It was to make him drop the weapon. After those words, the enemy realized it wasn't just about brute strength, and that the hero would prove it with his next strike. Even in the face of perfect tactics and a brutal attack, the boar believed the human was merely a copy. He just couldn't understand how someone could be so formidable in both strategy and attack. The protagonist declared that this would be the end for the enemy, since he no longer possessed the weapon that could prevent it. Both tried to fight on equal terms, but the enemy believed the hero's physique was his real weapon. In the blink of an eye, the boar's energy was completely depleted. Now the protagonist would show which of the two was the more intelligent. By defeating the enemy, he claimed victory and the dark area, still having 2 attempts left. After the battle, the hero returned to his original body, though he was completely sore. The sacrifice was an extremely powerful ability, but combining it with his physique placed excessive strain on his body. He noticed the boss had left an item and went to check what it was, discovering a weapon called Blood Mist. It was the sword the boss had used to block the protagonist's thunder attack. With a chance of a 50% experience point bonus, he wouldn't let the opportunity slip away. Especially now that he had reached level 7, he realized that using the sacrifice ability came with a cost. Its damage didn't vanish. Now he faced a dilemma, since he had the 50% experience points he wanted. But he also needed to listen to Sakura, who had asked him to replenish his strength. The plan was to level up 6 times in 1 week, reach level 12, and return safely to the original world. He wouldn't ignore the additional 50% experience either, because becoming stronger had a price, and he didn't intend to avoid it. He hoped to continue his winning streak, and so he chose to enter the challenge again. President Bode thought it had already been a long time since the guy had entered, and he should have come out by now. Seeing Sakura's concern, the president said he might have accepted a new challenge. Bode knew the human hadn't lost, since his body hadn't been ejected. Sakura was discouraged because her master had promised to leave after the first round. To make Sakura feel even worse, Vice President Pig returned from his nap being unpleasant as usual. He said it was cruel to give hope to someone who didn't deserve it. He went on to say that if the human hadn't brought enough healing potions, he wouldn't survive a second round. She said the fact she could still hear the power of thunder meant he was still alive. When President Bode looked at Sakura with that determination in her eyes, he felt her spirit was strong. The vice president kept being unpleasant, claiming that if the human died, it would be Sakura's fault. Upon hearing him say she'd be responsible for any harm because she encouraged him, she got angry. Sakura's gaze was so threatening that Vice President Pig felt intimidated. The president couldn't take the vice president's nonsense anymore either and ordered him to be quiet. Even so, he kept saying he couldn't wait to see their faces when they realized the human had been defeated. Given his persistence in disobeying, Bode ordered Pig to leave the area immediately. He did it to protect the vice president because Sakura's powers were limitless, and Bode knew it. The president asked Sakura what had happened when he noticed something different about her. She said she was sad because her master's thunder had stopped, and the sorrow was visible in her eyes. Noticing the thunder had ceased, the vice president commented that, for a human, he had gone way too far. But something within the dimension made everyone alarmed. President Bode heard a strange sound and wanted to know what it was. It was a familiar feeling to him, and he suspected the darkness was trying to break the seal. He grew more frightened as he saw a silhouette beginning to form. He told everyone to be ready, because he believed the darkness would attempt to break through. Vice President Pig, who had been making jokes, was now the most desperate of the three. His eyes widened when he recognized his master. Crossing through the portal, he apologized to Sakura for making her wait so long and said he used all 3 attempts and earned the bonus. Each time he leveled up, it was now written in his mind, level 9, but his strength was fading. Sakura ran to support her master before he collapsed to the ground. When the vice president noticed he had gone up 3 levels, he began to believe that human had been hiding his true power. The president ordered them to quickly treat the human, as he was in terrible condition. After the scare the protagonist gave Sakura, she was gradually healing him. Everyone could see an improvement as they were regenerating the hero together. The goat said that his muscles and nerves were severely damaged. Even so, the hero thanked them for the treatment and said he was already feeling much better. As he spoke, Sakura was in a bad mood, thinking the master always broke his promises. He apologized and said he would be more responsible, but he simply couldn't resist the temptation. The goat wanted to know if he had repeated the same thing 3 times. The pig looked at him, and both went silent for a moment. Still, the goat wanted answers and asked why he had challenged the area 3 times. The goat believed that when the human left, his area had become stronger than darkness itself. If Kevin was a genius, then that human was someone who surpassed a genius. The vice president Pig cleared his throat to get their attention. Then he said he'd like to apologize for having underestimated him before. The protagonist said it was all in the past, especially since the pig had helped with the treatment. Hearing that, the pig pointed out that they had only healed the surface wounds, and the deep ones had yet to recover. The goat confirmed what the pig said and added that if the treatment had been delayed, he wouldn't have made it. The goat also warned that the technique or magic used might prevent his body from evolving in the future. He felt that the power was altering his mind and realized something was watching him. Sakura noticed he was acting strange and asked what was going on. To cover it up, he said he was just tired, when in fact he was being mentally attacked by darkness. The goat stated that he would get better by consuming elixirs and potions, so he handed him a few potions, recommending he take 1 a day and meditate to absorb the effects better. Despite the pig's suspicious look, the goat gave him the medicine and the protagonist was satisfied. The goat said that it was Kevin's favorite remedy and would be essential for his recovery. He also said that if the protagonist had talent, Kevin might accept him as an apprentice and teach him medicine. The next revelation surprised even Sakura, who didn't know Kevin possessed the legendary law of ruin. When the pig realized the human knew nothing about this legend, he began to find him even stranger. He explained that the first laws were written in ancient times and had the power to destroy the world. The pig said Kevin was called a genius for mastering the 12th law. The hero was filled with hope, thinking that if he found Kevin, he might fully regenerate. The goat explained that Kevin didn't accept just anyone, so he handed the protagonist a letter of recommendation. After hearing that he needed to gather rare materials and valuable medicinal items, the two said goodbye. The pig noticed that the human had caught President Goat's interest. The pig heard from the president that he was simply investing in the future. To the pig, that was a high-risk investment, since few managed to conquer the dark area alone. The goat said that 1,000 years ago, a great being gave rise to the Beastman clan. Later, already in a forest with large branches, the protagonist asked Sakura if she knew anything about Kevin. The Beast Girl replied that she had asked the president, but the location was a bit far. Even so, they could use the journey to level up, as it aligned with their goals. Sensing something was off, he asked Sakura what was going on. She explained that for that mission, they would need to form a group. She said this while spotting people up ahead. The hero wanted to know why there were so many people on that path. Sakura explained that place was called Mission Point. Many adventurers gathered there, but after some time, they would disappear. He got excited seeing the place, as it looked like a mission market, and he wanted to try it out. Sakura stayed behind while he walked forward, saying she'd keep an eye on him. Someone was shouting that they were looking for a warrior or tank at level 15 with a combat power above 6,000. They said they'd offer a generous bonus to anyone who met the requirements. People nearby were commenting that it was the second day and no one had accepted, as the mission was too dangerous. A subordinate asked the captain to choose another mission, as they had already lost 2 days. The captain was frustrated, having bought information at the tavern saying the mission was level 12. The reward was a rare ingredient with medicinal properties and increased recovery. Even so, the same subordinate tried to convince him, saying they couldn't leave without enough people. The protagonist approached and, smiling, asked if he could join. The captain said he would accept someone between level 12 and 14. When he heard that the hero was level 9, he became discouraged. When he said he could stay in the rear, it made the captain furious, and he had to be restrained. A flash of light announced that only 10 minutes remained before the mission would begin. The group members asked the captain to make a decision quickly so they wouldn't miss another opportunity. They said they could try it, as long as they had the required number of people. Very angry, the captain said he would give the protagonist a chance. The hero placed a hand on the captain's shoulder and said he was happy to be part of a group for the first time. Everyone was surprised to learn it was his first time being in a group. As soon as they passed through the portal, they were informed that the mission was level 16. It didn't take long for level 16 monsters to start appearing. The group members were terrified. The captain was furious when he realized he had received the wrong information. He believed the mission was level 12. Everyone was lying down, keeping watch on something, and the captain assured them they'd be fine since they were level 15. They could use a rare item to lead the mission, but remembered they had a new member. The level 9 guy had only been seen at the beginning. Suddenly, a bright light lit up everything and lightning and thunder filled the sky. They all hid in a bush to see what was going on. It was the hero effortlessly destroying enemies. He thought this mission was much easier than the dark area. The group was shocked, as despite being higher level, the protagonist was far stronger. After defeating several monsters, he could hardly wait to receive his bonus. He continued forward, also inspiring the group, who now saw a possibility of victory. They were finishing off the monsters the protagonist had left weakened. Everyone felt that the level 9 warrior was practically completing the mission on his own. One of the female warriors noticed he seemed to know the monster's weak spots. It was hard to believe he was only level 9. She asked the leader, who had several connections, if he knew who that person was. Meanwhile, the protagonist continued weakening and eliminating as many monsters as possible. But he wasn't satisfied with the points he was gaining that way. It would take too long to level up. He thought those monsters weren't a big deal as long as he was careful with the thorns. He knew the mission supposedly involved collecting a rose and thought he could give it to Kevin as a gesture of goodwill. He said the boss fight was approaching, that the enemies would be weak to fire, and the mage could help. The mage was pleased to also join the fight and have his moment to shine. The hero warned them to be careful with the stained glass thorns. If hit, they could be poisoned. Everyone wondered how he knew so much about the monsters. Being only level 9, he wasn't supposed to have that much battle experience, and the leader began to grow suspicious of his abilities. Meanwhile, the mage was achieving some feats and protecting his team. After some time fighting and freeing himself from the vines, the mage lit a campfire, and some of them sat around it. When they referred to the protagonist as Sir Warrior, it was as if he were someone truly special. Meanwhile, the hero was having a private conversation with the leader, who took the chance to formally introduce himself. After asking a few questions, all he got as an answer was that the protagonist was just a rookie. The captain wanted to know if the hero had information about the level of missions in different regions. When the protagonist said he didn't know, Victor thought he was just pretending. So they returned, and the leader was telling everyone that this place was different from the others that vanished. After hearing that, the protagonist asked what point Victor was trying to make. The leader said he was part of an elite guild made up of 15 pioneers known as the Big Goat Party. After listening carefully to everything the leader said, the protagonist asked again what his point of view was. Seeing that he hadn't understood, the leader told him about a newly arrived level 18 mission, which was difficult due to lack of information. The protagonist thought it was a mission involving a monster from the dark area. It must be some kind of bonus. Seeing the protagonist's interest in doing the bonus mission, the leader told him he should meet their captain. The hero asked if, even at level 9, he really wanted him to take part in a level 18 mission. For the hero, it was good to hear all of that, but he had 2 conditions to help. While waiting to hear the hero's conditions, the leader thought it would be great to have the support of someone strong. The conditions were to keep the initial experience points and to choose his reward before the others. The leader didn't find that reasonable. Even if he allowed it, he would need to ask permission from the captain and the rest of the team. It was agreed that the 2 would talk properly after the mission they were on was finished. Since they had already rested enough, they decided to head back. As they walked, the team was still impressed by the leader's magical strikes. Although flattered to hear his team speak well of him, he was giving the credit to the protagonist. Speaking of him, the protagonist mentioned that he had already taken his share of the roses, the rest would be split. Upon hearing that, the leader stated that now they should distribute the bonus, and that the rewards would be handed out at the end. Victor wanted to know if the protagonist had some time. He wanted to thank Captain Haver and introduce him to the hero. After that, he stepped outside and found Sakura, telling her what had happened. She said it was a great opportunity. For her, something like that only happened after reaching level 30. To help, she would gather information around the city, and they arranged to meet later at the Adventurers Guild. As a precaution, Sakura gave him some potions and enough money for 3 days. He thanked her and said goodbye. The beast girl made a pretty face as she said farewell to her master. However, after he walked away, her expression turned serious. She was like that because she intended to investigate more about the genius Kevin. If he had managed to master the fusion of wind and earth, her plans to eliminate Kevin would need adjustments. After some time, Victor took the protagonist to meet the captain, who thought it was all a joke. That captain believed Victor was playing around and didn't like the idea of someone low-level leading his group. Victor showed that he trusted the protagonist, even though he was level 9, because it was thanks to him they completed the mission. The vice captain believed that acting like that meant Victor could no longer remain in their group. The young leader, upset with the comments, asked them to give him a chance and judge for themselves. Still facing away, the captain asked Victor if the young man in question was accompanying him. As soon as Victor said the hero was waiting outside, the vice captain wasted no time and began mocking. Red with anger, Victor thought the vice captain always mocked him, but this time he would prove his worth. The captain ordered him to bring the person in question, and upon hearing that, the young man was pleased. He immediately went to get the protagonist and walked with him through the others. As soon as they arrived, the hero said his name and stated he was a level 9 warrior. First, everyone looked attentively to see what the vice captain Luke would do. Within seconds, Luke was already laughing and mocking the hero to his face, saying he reeked of weakness. While Victor asked the protagonist to simply ignore it, the hero remained silent and expressionless. It didn't take long for the captain to speak, asking if he was capable of clearing the mission for them. The hero said he was 100% confident in himself, but there was still an additional condition. After hearing that he was fully confident, the captain wanted to know what the extra condition was. With eyes that radiated strength and capability, he said he wanted to be in charge. He wanted to be the captain. Harvey asked if the protagonist wanted to be the captain and leave 15 elite members. Victor asked if he had lost his mind, but the protagonist explained that it would be just for that mission. Realizing Harvey only cared about the monetary side, the hero guaranteed effectiveness as captain and success in the mission. Luke continued being an annoying vice captain, just like other members of that complicated group. However, the final word belonged to the captain, who accepted the 3 conditions proposed by the mysterious hero. Harvey gave a stern warning, stating that if he failed, there would be no mercy. Even with Luke's protests, the Great Goat stated there was no better alternative at that moment. Still, the vice captain insisted that, like Victor, the captain was also being deceived. With a cold gaze, Harvey reminded them that people mock that guild for never achieving anything. He declared that he would seize even the smallest chance and would personally deal with the imposter if necessary. Close to the mission site, the group began to be bombarded with laughter from rival opponents. The mockery faded as they noticed it wasn't the usual captain in front, but a strange unknown man. The opposing team's leader noticed the change and began provoking the protagonist with his irritating attitude. In a low tone, Victor explained that the rival captain considered them his greatest enemies. The situation was visibly uncomfortable, and all members of the group showed uneasiness. After observing and hearing the comments, the hero concluded that they were truly in a complicated situation. As they passed the rival captain, the protagonist politely apologized for interrupting their path. Holding a grudge, the enemy leader remarked to Harvey that the new captain was getting full of himself. Tired of the insults, the protagonist cast a sideways glance and declared that the result would speak for itself. After that, he and the group moved forward with determination toward the mission that was about to begin. With the divine eye and so many powerful allies, the hero felt confident in the victory to come. As soon as they arrived, it was announced that the new mission would finally begin. The original captain questioned the hero about what plan he intended to follow. But for the protagonist, it was first necessary to confirm whether the initial experience points would be his alone. Harvey valued the honor of the group above all else, but he didn't want to be let down by empty promises. After confirming that the points would indeed go to the protagonist, he began to give instructions. Everyone was attentive and organized, except Luke, who rejected any leadership coming from the protagonist. The vice captain was waiting for an opportunity to settle the score and secure his own points. While checking his stats, the hero thought about the words Victor had said regarding leadership. A prompt appeared on the panel to choose the mission's difficulty: easy, medium, or hard. Seeing that the hard mode would triple the experience points, the protagonist became interested. Upon choosing the option, a message appeared in the sky, visible to everyone nearby. Harvey was the first to be outraged upon realizing the hardest difficulty had been selected. Soon the others understood they were about to face the challenge at its highest level. Trembling, Victor approached the hero and asked if it had been an impulsive mistake. It was the perfect moment for Luke to raise doubts and discredit the hero. He announced in front of everyone that if anything went wrong, they could use the trumpet to escape through the safe route. The protagonist, seeing time was short, took the initiative and headed straight for the combat area. He knew he needed to act quickly and make a precise move to gain trust. Activating the divine eye, he analyzed the enemies and identified that they would be facing Crocs-type monsters. With that, he could visualize their weaknesses and devise a direct and efficient plan. Meanwhile, Luke shouted accusations, pointing his finger and saying the level 9 was taking advantage. Harvey began to question whether the hero really knew what he was doing. Without wasting time, the protagonist asked everyone to follow him, as he knew how to guide them safely. He ordered the mages not to stand still and to begin casting their fire spells. Victor, once again confident in the hero, instructed the mages to obey without hesitation. They began casting fire spells, determined not to be easily defeated. That positive energy spread to the other members, who began to believe in a possible victory. 6 Crocs coordinated a multi-directional attack, placing the hero directly in the danger zone. Frightened, Harvey asked him to fall back immediately, fearing the worst. However, the protagonist didn't listen and ordered the mages to fire the spells just in front of him. They obeyed and launched the spells exactly 1 meter beyond the monster's line. Moments later, the hero was seen in the midst of the flames, surrounded by smoke and lightning from his own power. Everyone noticed that the coordinated attacks of the Crocs had been completely stopped. Furthermore, the enemies were taking double damage due to the combination of abilities. Victor was stunned to see the Crocs being paralyzed by the mage's fire magic. The hero explained that, in addition to being neutralized, the monsters would take massive damage. Upon hearing this, the group members began to feel hopeful for a positive outcome. Harvey, watching everything, began to doubt that this young man was just a level 9 warrior. Vice Captain Luke, on the other hand, cried and complained, still trying to discredit the hero. With such disgraceful behavior, Victor stepped in to defend the protagonist in front of everyone. When Luke tried to justify himself, he was promptly silenced by a decisive action. Victor declared there was no more time to waste with people who only got in the way. Answering the hero's call, Harvey ordered everyone to move out together to complete the mission. Commanded by the captain and led by the hero's strategy, they advanced with courage and unity. Harvey, pleased with the turnaround, let out his battle cry, making everyone believe in that unexpected leadership. 30 minutes later, during the Swamp Shadows mission, the group walked silently among the twisted trees. Everyone was anxious after receiving the message that all other teams had been defeated inside the swamp. Aware of the growing tension, the vice captain began to question the hero's credibility with a hint of disdain. As always, Victor was the first to defend him, showing clear dislike for the vice captain. Even though he was completely wrong, the vice captain couldn't keep quiet and made it clear that the man was only a temporary leader. However, he'd heard Harvey firmly tell him to stay silent, as he was disturbing the current captain's concentration. Meanwhile, the hero continued his analysis with the divine eye, and after finishing it, already knew exactly what to expect. After that precise sweep, he believed things might be easier than he initially imagined. The results showed that the swamp covered about 300 square meters, and the route was excellent and well mapped. He explained everything clearly, drawing a sketch with a branch on the ground covered in damp leaves. Soon after, everyone took their positions to continue the mission, while the hero stated that, like Vice Captain Luke, he was a temporary leader, but his efforts were focused on the mutual benefit of all members. Turning to the group, the hero declared that he was the leader and captain at that moment, so they should follow his orders. Sometime later, the vice captain went to complain to Captain Harvey, who told him it wasn't the time for pointless arguments. Upon hearing that direct reprimand, Luke felt even more anger and jealousy toward the newcomer leading the expedition. Meanwhile, the hero reflected that, in the past, his spirit might have been crushed by someone so hostile. He knew that, no matter the world, there would always be people who intimidated the weak or those they saw as a threat. Having been a victim of such behavior himself, he spoke in a harsh voice, saying they should stop the pointless talk. Harvey shared that, once, upon reaching halfway, he spotted a trail leading to the next area. The hero told the former captain there was no reason to worry, despite the environment being clearly dangerous. He would stay behind and draw the monsters while Harvey guided the others to the next safe area. Victor, upon hearing the hero's plan, was shocked, thinking it was too risky to act alone in such terrain. Offering his opinion with mocking laughter, the vice captain scoffed, saying the hero had no realistic plan, only something pathetic. Ignoring the unnecessary remarks, the hero instructed Victor to carefully memorize the areas of lower risk. Without responding to any provocative questions, he stated he would defeat all the monsters alone and in silence. With a firm and resolute gaze, he looked at everyone and asked if he had ever acted carelessly before. No one, not even the vice captain, had the courage or enough arguments to counter that direct question. In the face of absolute silence, he simply raised his hand with his back turned to the group and ordered them to take formation immediately. As he began to cross a dark stream, he realized the situation was worse than expected in that swampy stretch. He noticed that the terrain was perfect for lightning attacks, and with that, his eyes lit up with excitement. Meanwhile, in another part of the path, the vice captain tried to convince Harvey not to trust the level 9 newcomer. As always, Victor defended the hero, saying that his rank didn't matter. He trusted in his talent. Back with the hero, he knew that 15 of those creatures were enough to paralyze anyone with intense fear. They were large and repulsive beings, all level 18, charging forward with open mouths and grotesque tongues. However, the hero was prepared to defend and counterattack any monster that appeared at that moment. With that, he defeated several of them in just a few strikes, with surprising precision and powerful electric blows. He realized the monsters hid in the shadows after each attack, making it hard to pinpoint their positions. So he unleashed a maximum-powered electric attack into the muddy stream full of rock. When the thunder current hit them, they could no longer remain hidden in the dark shadows. That caused them all to reveal their positions at once, exposing the true threat. Now all the monsters were gathered in a single point, making the combat strategy easier. He knew that, for average adventurers, this situation would be fatal, but his body was that of a supreme warrior. Running at high speed through the shallow water, the hero asked Harvey to lead the group along the previously shown route. The team could hardly believe he had managed to attract all the dark monsters alone and without hesitation. In the face of the hero's evident success, Victor looked at the vice captain and reminded him how he had praised the hero's powers. Now Luke admitted that he had underestimated the hero in every aspect, both his abilities and judgment. Harvey encouraged everyone not to stand still, as they needed to move forward while the hero distracted the monsters. Knowing that Victor had fully memorized the path, he asked him to guide the rest of the group accurately. Meanwhile, the hero continued with his bold plan to annihilate the swamp monsters once and for all. That was the combat zone he had desired to execute his abilities with strategic perfection. The plan was to combine lightning with piercing attacks, giving the hostile enemies no chance to react. As the growing electric charge intensified, the monsters began to writhe in unbearable pain. Some leaped to a moderate height, trying to escape the relentless attack striking them. Observing everything carefully, the hero believed there was still time and no need to rush his assault. After some time of intense battle, everyone was exhausted, but they had managed to escape the cursed swamp. Now they were satisfied, as they had never reached that part of the mission before, not even the other teams. Satisfied, Victor informed them that the boss activation point was just ahead in the wider clearing. They believed the boss itself wouldn't be particularly difficult, as the swamp had been the hardest part of the mission. They debated whether to head to the boss area alone or wait for the hero, who was still some distance away. Contrary to what many expected, The vice captain now believed they should wait for the new captain. Everyone looked at him with suspicion, knowing how hostile he had been before. Faced with this, the vice captain confessed that he had doubted the hero's strength, but now recognized that he had proven his worth. Hearing his words, Victor didn't even know how to react, so surprised he was by that admission. Meanwhile, Harvey burst into laughter, since even the vice captain now realized it was better to be safe than sorry. Pleased, he said he was proud of the vice captain's attitude, as it was the safest choice at that moment. Unexpectedly, the hero returned and informed them that he had already defeated all the shadow monsters on his own. He confirmed that the area ahead was where the boss was located, and so he suggested that everyone recover first. He was eager to end the hard mode mission with a final, decisive strike. Everyone was certain that the hero was incredibly powerful for having defeated so many monsters alone. The captain was convinced that, at the end of the mission, they should recommend him to the guild master without hesitation. As he was making his observation, a boss appeared. It was level 18 and didn't seem like much. Disappointed, the hero began to question whether this place actually had a boss gate, wondering if it really was hard mode. They knew it wasn't unheard of for a boss to have a gate, even if the mission itself wasn't that challenging. Now the hero understood that the Great Gate with the Eye, seen in the dark area of Cardialis, must be exclusive to dark types. The vice captain was eager to move quickly to the negative point, as victory seemed close. However, the hero wanted to observe the territory a bit more. He then asked Harvey to gather the most resilient and agile members. Harvey promptly complied, coordinating those who showed the most experience. Meanwhile, Victor showed how impressed he was with the protagonist. The hero explained that his plan was to count on Harvey and Luke to lead the warriors in battle. He asked them to surround the boss with agile members and keep using debuff items to divide its attention. With so many strategies in action, Captain Harvey could hardly believe the vice captain was now saying he trusted the hero. Under the protagonist's command, they were ready to bring the boss down. A long time had passed, and outside, the other team noticed that Big Goat's group was still fighting. The leader of the other team stated that, this time, a human warrior was in charge, and after his entry, hard mode had been activated. Because of that creature was waiting for their failure to humiliate them in front of everyone. Meanwhile, inside the mission, the group continued fiercely battling the boss. Concerned about the protagonist, Victor asked if he should provide magical support. The hero asked them to simply stay alert, since, knowing the attack patterns, they should only act on his signal. The fight continued, and the dark boss seemed uncontrollable, but the hero was using his divine eyes. Then the time came for the mages to act. The hero asked them to attack with their magic. The vice captain, showing that he trusted the hero's orders, commented that once again he had foreseen what would happen. He told everyone to pay attention, as the true hard mode was about to begin. However, 15 minutes later, the Swamp Watcher boss had been defeated. In response to that outcome, everyone raised their weapons and shouted with excitement. Not even Captain Harvey could believe that long-awaited moment had finally come for his team. Now the vice captain also agreed that the hero should be introduced to the guild leader. Bo Noi had achieved what he needed, reaching level 10, and his current attack power was 45,000. He believed that, after claiming all the bonus experience points for himself, things would get even better. A message arrived informing him that, as the owner of the Ring of Infinity and having reached level 10, he would receive a bonus. He noticed that upon reaching certain levels, he received bonuses and decided to check what they were. As soon as he tried on the Black Cloak disguise, he noticed something different. When the Fox Beastman set was hidden, that armor could appear. He noticed changes in his body, which was adapting to its needs, and decided to test them later. Upon noticing the change, Victor commented to the protagonist, who simply said he had switched equipment. When the vice captain observed the hero, he stated that if he had looked like that from the beginning, he would have recognized his strength sooner. Leader Harvey asked the protagonist for a favor, and he immediately asked what it was about. Shortly after, the team waiting outside noticed that they were coming out. They couldn't believe their eyes as they received notifications that the rival guild had managed to break the record on hard mode. Stunned, they couldn't believe they had actually cleared hard mode. However, as everyone stepped out of the portal, the outsiders assumed it was the human in black armor who had accomplished such a feat. The commotion was so great that Captain Harvey commented to the vice captain that it had been a long time since they were surrounded like that. Victor took the chance to approach the protagonist and mentioned that everyone was talking about him at that moment. After chatting with Victor, the protagonist noticed the leader of the other formation and mentioned that the Great Goats Guild had set the record. Displeased, the other leader said that it only happened because there was someone different among them. Staring at the leader, the protagonist realized he was contradicting himself since he had previously called him weak. The wolf man then offered a sincere apology, admitting he had been wrong. However, he reflected that this warrior wasn't ordinary, and at that exact moment, the guild received a high-level request. After that, the place erupted in even more commotion, as everyone wanted to know more about the revered human leader. Nevertheless, the leader of the other team warned that they should wait in line, as he had asked for contact first. With that, the crowd gathered around, and the hero didn't even understand how it all happened. Curious, the great goat announced that the hero was already heading to their guild, and that the others should keep their distance. In the Beastman city located in the north, everyone was stunned to see an imposing figure. It was the protagonist, now wearing the cloak of darkness he had earned in the last mission. Many were saying that this was the famous QS guild, but the captain was supposed to be Harvey, even though a human was standing in his place. When he was already in front of the Adventurers Guild, the hero asked the rest of the group to wait for him. That was the agreed meeting spot to wait for Sakura, so he decided to go inside and check for news about her. Meanwhile, inside the guild, the cat girl was refusing drink invitations from some beastmen. She was in a hurry and asked them to step aside, but the beastman speaking to the girl didn't want to be interrupted. As he passed by, one of the beastmen noticed he already knew that human, the same one who had taken their mission. The cat girl also realized that he was Sakura's friend. When the beastman recognized the human, he remembered the gear he wore. They raised doubts about how he could have acquired it, saying he must have bought it since he lacked the strength. But he didn't care, he only wanted news about Sakura, though the cat girl said she hadn't seen her in a while. When the cat girl mentioned that the only ones nearby were those two noisy guys, the men asked if she was referring to them, and heard her confirm it with a cheerful tone. The immediate reaction was to try to go after her, saying she shouldn't speak so lightly. However, his arm was grabbed by the hero, who would not tolerate any disrespect in front of him. After the human released the beastman's arm, he started to wonder how that guy had gotten so strong. Even so, they wanted to start a fight, and to avoid attracting the guard's attention, they invited him to fight outside. Turning his back, the hero apologized to the cat girl for the interruption, as he believed Sakura still had unresolved matters. She asked him not to go, saying there was guaranteed protection inside the guild thanks to the guards. He simply turned back with a gentle face and told her to stay calm. Everything would be fine. Some beastmen took this as an insult and thought a human shouldn't behave that way toward beastmen. However, as they stepped outside, Harvey immediately recognized the hero as captain and asked if there was a problem. As soon as the beastmen realized the human was being called captain by several people, they were petrified. Even the cat girl couldn't resist and went to the door to peek. When her team asked what was going on, the hero explained that those were the ones who had started the fight. Even the vice captain didn't like hearing that their leader had been bothered. However, when they looked around for the two troublemakers, they were already far away, saying it had all been a misunderstanding. With that, Victor wanted to know what would happen to them, but the hero wasn't concerned. He asked to be taken to the guild more quickly, and after a while, the meeting began. In it, they discussed the strong performance of the group led by the hero. Harvey showed great satisfaction and proudly spoke of the hero's talent and his help in the mission. However, another beastman didn't like having humans present in his guild. Upon hearing that he was being accused of being a spy from another guild, the hero was stunned. The situation worsened when the vice captain stated that Redum had his reasons for acting that way. Victor made it clear that he didn't like the way the vice captain referred to the hero. He also commented that many guilds needed strength and support, while theirs only rejected it. The guild leader, a beast man with canine features, simply listened attentively to what was being said about the hero. Seeing the leader hesitate, Redum tried to influence the decision, saying the human's presence wouldn't be good for the guild. As the situation was already tense, Harvey tried to defend the hero with positive arguments. But this only sparked a heated discussion with Redum, who accused him of supporting humans just because he was one too. With tempers flaring, even with Harvey's efforts to keep the hero in the guild, everything seemed to be in vain, until the leader finally spoke, saying they would follow Redum's suggestion. Therefore, they would decline the human's help, although they were thankful for the support he gave during the mission. Harvey couldn't understand why they had made such a decision. Even so, obediently, he simply accepted it, closing his eyes with an expression of disappointment. The hero approached Harvey and said he was a great captain and had loyal people by his side. He added that it was an honor to fight alongside him, and that he would gladly do it again if possible. The hero's words moved not only Harvey but the entire team he had led. Harvey had done everything he could to convince the leaders but had failed, and now he could only watch the hero leave. Before going, the hero raised his hand and said it was great to fight with everyone and that he hoped they would all grow stronger. As the human walked away, Redum, relieved not to have him on the team, told him to take care. Harvey noticed the sarcasm in his companion's voice and stated that it was a shame to lose someone with so much potential. The beast man only laughed, believing the human had just gotten lucky in leading that mission. Hearing this, the whole team felt disappointed and didn't even want to continue such a disheartening conversation. Outside the guild, the hero reflected on whether he should continue searching for Sakura or focus on his own growth. He was surprised to realize that, the whole time, he had been followed by the leader of the other guild who had previously treated him poorly. The hero asked the beastman if he was following him and was told that yes, he had a complicated request and needed help. He He said the reward and all other matters would be entirely up to the hero. This pleased the protagonist, who asked what kind of request it was, since he would have full control over the rewards. The beast man said it was something urgent and involved the disappearance of the daughter of an influential merchant. Upon hearing the request, the protagonist was amazed, as he had no idea that guilds accepted missions of that level. The beast man explained that guilds didn't survive on honor alone, they also depended on money. Still, the hero imagined that the competition for the 5 gold coins must have been intense. The beast man revealed that the person kidnapped wasn't just anyone. The hero could hardly believe it when he learned that the guild president was willing to offer half the reward. Soon, they arrived at the entrance of the said guild, where the master was already awaiting the hero's arrival. Inside the guild, the president was speaking with the father of the missing girl. The man showed frustration, as he expected answers the guild members had failed to provide. Already aware of the previous failures, the girl's father felt deceived by the service received. As the beast man arrived with the hero, both witnessed the client's dissatisfaction with the guild president. The beast man explained to the protagonist that they had already tried everything up to that point. He said the enemy group was made up of about 20 level 19 individuals, led by a level 25 berserker. He believed that, after the initial failure, the enemies had grown even more confident. Placing a hand on the hero's shoulder, the beast man said he desperately needed his help. While speaking, he became so emotional that tears began to fall, showing just how worried he was about the guild's reputation. Seeing the beast man's sadness, the protagonist asked him to calm down and take a deep breath. With that, the hero reflected on the mission, which would take place in a mountainous area filled with traps, facing a level 25 berserker. While the hero pondered the challenge, he heard the wealthy merchant yelling at the guild members, even going so far as to threaten them. The protagonist noticed that, to the merchant, everything revolved around money, as he had not once asked about his daughter. Moreover, the merchant imposed an extremely high fine in case the guild failed the mission. Faced with that scene, the hero called the man's attention and assured him that his daughter could be rescued. Walking toward the merchant, the hero stated that he would return the daughter the following day. The merchant wanted to know from the guild master who that young man was, speaking with such confidence. Since the beastman knew the guild master didn't know the hero, he formally introduced him. The merchant found it strange that a beastman guild had a human among its warriors. After understanding who the protagonist was, the large beast man with the body of a bull informed him about the stated penalty. The hero not only knew about the fine but also proposed a bold wager to the merchant. Upon hearing the proposal, Wenton thought the protagonist was bluffing, until he listened to the details carefully. With confidence, the hero declared that if he failed, he would pay 50,000 gold coins as a penalty. When the guild leader and vice leader heard that the hero intended to pay 10 times the original fine, they nearly fainted, but the merchant simply demanded the hero confirm the payment commitment. A contract was quickly drawn up between the merchant and the guild, sealing the terms of the agreement. Against his will, the guild leader signed it, as he had disagreed with the stated values from the beginning. As he left, the merchant said he would simply await the result the next day. Not understanding, the vice leader asked the leader why he had signed such a harmful contract. The guild leader, however, saw no other alternative, and everyone ended up blaming the hero for the situation. The mood suddenly shifted when it was announced that the president of the Shaman Association was present. The vice leader could barely believe it, and upon hearing the name, the hero recognized the presence of that important figure. As soon as President Bode arrived, he greeted the guild leader and asked about the vice leader's health. The leader explained that he had called the president to take care of the vice leader's injuries. President Bode was already aware that the vice leader had been injured during a previous mission. He quickly began preparations to treat and heal the beastman. As the hero spoke to President Bode with a certain familiarity, everyone in the hall began to observe. With admiration, they realized the young man was close to the president of the association. With a teacup in hand, they spoke about where they had met in the past. President Bode believed that the hero was fully capable of completing that difficult mission. Meanwhile, the president asked the guild official how the hero knew Bode. Realizing the hero was well connected, the vice leader decided to accompany him on the mission, believing his experience could be useful. Holding the cup of tea, the hero said he didn't mind, and that if he wanted to come, he was free to join. After all, the wounds had already been healed, and the vice leader was ready to fight. Wishing the hero good luck, the president insisted on recalling where they had met. Then he revealed that the hero had recently passed the White Shaman exam. Upon hearing that he was the newest White Shaman of Northern, everyone was left speechless. President Bode went on to say that he knew the hero was more powerful than he appeared. Meanwhile, Hugh wanted to know what the hero's plan was, as the sun was already setting on the horizon. The hero simply asked Hugh to guide him to the desired location, and the beastmen assumed they were going to resupply. However, the protagonist wanted to go to the arena, something the beastman couldn't understand. As he observed the path, the hero thought that an ordinary warrior wouldn't do for that specific request. Very irritated, the beastman announced that they had arrived at the arena, but reminded him that the deadline was the next day. While Hugh paid the entrance fee, he asked which matches were taking place that day. The hero, however, made it clear that he didn't want to watch. He wanted to participate in a match. The Beastman at the reception said that if he was serious, he could fill out the registration form. The protagonist had a plan and needed to adjust the divine selection system for mercenary attributes. The arena was packed, and the first participants were a cat beastman of level 21. He would fight against an ogre, and upon seeing the black cat, the audience grew worried. Even though the opponent had only one arm, he was incredibly fast. While the cat man appeared overconfident, he told his opponent to come closer. As expected, the ogre launched the first strike, raising his axe. Casting a wicked glance at the ogre, the cat simply dashed past him. And the move was so fast that the ogre didn't even realize the cat had passed him. Because of that, when he swung his axe, it hit nothing. The next act was the cat's counterattack, landing directly on the ogre's back. Showing that he was a swift and skilled fighter, he won with a single blow. After defeating the ogre, he looked at the ground and said that no one can hit a shadow. With only him left standing in the center of the arena, everyone shouted that the cat had won once again. They were soon celebrating another victory for Naruto. In the arena, they commented on how that ambush move always worked. The hero, watching the match, found the cat's ability to be truly impressive. Hugh, standing next to the hero, warned that defeating a mercenary would be difficult. After all, he was a combat specialist. The protagonist began to wonder if the mercenary from the east was really that powerful. It was explained that there were several guilds specialized in mercenaries, and Naruto came from one of them. The hero thought those guilds seemed like underground secret organizations. Meanwhile, the crowd in the stands was shouting eagerly for the next fight. They were outraged, thinking that the human was a joke. Not even a beast man had managed to defeat him before. Even the black cat thought it was madness for a human to want to face him. As the hero made his way to the arena, Hugh told him not to take such a risk. The protagonist believed that regardless of experience, no one ever knew the final outcome. The beast man thought it was pointless for that human to seem nice. Confidence wouldn't help. The cat asked the human if he really had no experience at all. Looking at his sharp claws, he warned that if the human wanted to fight, he wouldn't hold back. While the hero simply stared at him, the cat told him he could go ahead. It was then announced that the next match would be between a rookie and one-armed Naruto. With malicious intent in his eyes, the cat said he would end it quickly. As the cat performed at full speed, the crowd went wild in the stand. The protagonist thought about sticking to the plan, since the cat was absurdly fast. In that moment, he activated some skills as the cat approached. What caught the cat's attention was the fact that the hero didn't move a single inch. Everything happened so fast that the protagonist couldn't calculate anything. In the stands, everyone commented that they also didn't understand why the cat had stopped. The cat, frozen, watched the human, who now seemed like someone completely different. Suddenly, the opponent began to feel a powerful presence coming from the hero. With terrifying eyes, the hero simply smiled and asked if the cat had given up. If so, he warned that he would strike first. The cat couldn't look directly at the newcomer, knowing that he was different. A notification arrived just in time, stating that absolute duplication could now be acquired. He remembered how it worked, that he needed to touch the opponent's heart. He was ready to test it, and told the black cat that he would show him what he was made of. The cat didn't understand why the human was so excited coming toward him, but he knew he should be careful with all that confidence. The hero activated a skill for thieves and mercenaries that boosted agility. As soon as he attacked, he realized just how incredible that skill was. Meanwhile, the cat thought it was all just a bluff. He decided to end it right then and there. However, he seemed to be moving in slow motion. The hero could see the exact moment of the attack. When the cat noticed he was being closely watched, he became curious. And when he struck and saw that his attack had been blocked, he was so surprised that he backed off. He wanted to know how the human hadn't gotten hurt at all. The people in the stands were also shocked by what had just happened. With wide eyes, the thought crossed the cat's mind that this human might be the strongest. While all of that unfolded, the hero simply looked at his status window. The skill he wanted to duplicate was the ambush attack. It could be upgraded to Thunder Ambush. With the opponent entirely focused on him, something had happened. He wanted to understand why the dagger hadn't caused even a scratch. The hero refused to explain. It would take too long. But he warned that now it was his turn to attack. It was so fast that the cat didn't have time to run, and like a mouse, he fell into his own ambush. It was all over for him the moment the hero used Thunder Ambush. In addition to being extremely fast, that technique was filled with lightning. Now the protagonist knew he could rescue the kidnapped daughter. In the arena, it was announced that the protagonist was the winner. Outside the arena, the Beast Man and the vice leader of the guild couldn't believe it. That human was truly too powerful. In his thoughts, the hero gave thanks, knowing that his body had been adjusted. He had become agile and a true divine mercenary. Seeing it was already late, Hugh asked if he really wanted to carry out the rescue that night. The beast man was worried he wouldn't be able to see clearly. However, the protagonist knew he would see everything. Some time later, the two were seen entering a forested area as they made their way to the mission site. The hero realized that many days had passed and wondered how the merchant's daughter was doing. He thought that, with terrain like the fortress, it wasn't surprising that the previous attempts had failed. Hugh commented that he had seen the hero's abilities in the arena, but accepting that request was a heavy burden for their guild. As he said this, he didn't notice that the protagonist was no longer there and had no idea where he had gone. At the location, there were 3 guards, 1 level 22 and 2 level 21, chatting distractedly. Meanwhile, the protagonist was in a tree, observing everything with the divine eye activated. He managed to locate every exact point of the traps scattered around the area with impressive clarity. The skill seemed to have evolved, now clearly revealing all the hidden triggers. With everything scanned, he set out on the mission with a head full of conviction. He jumped from the tree with the black armor disguise set activated, which would only deactivate when necessary. He found it amazing how the divine selection system was so complete and absurdly detailed. With a light heart from already knowing exactly what to do, he moved forward without hesitation. He passed through the traps without deactivating them and without drawing the attention of the guards ahead. Once in position, he planned to take them down one by one with fast and silent attack. He created a subtle noise to lure the enemies toward where he was hidden in the shadows. Upon hearing the sound, the guards grew curious, wondering what it could be. One of them thought it was probably just some animal that always appeared in the area at night. While one went to investigate, the other 2 remained alert at their fixed watch posts. They believed the rookie guard shouldn't panic over something so ordinary. The hero assessed that, at that distance, he could use the kunai he had received from Hugh as a gift. After silently descending from the tree, he positioned himself behind the opponent with controlled breathing. When the beastman turned around, it was already too late. He was struck with lethal precision. The sound of the strike caught the attention of the other 2 guards, who looked suspiciously toward it. With steadiness, the protagonist held the enemy and delivered a clean, silent finishing blow. After that, he prepared to find the next guard and take him out quickly as well. He swung from a branch to avoid triggering the nearest trap and landed softly on the ground. He approached the remaining 2 guards, who were still chatting casually, unaware of the danger. They assumed their colleague was just relaxing for a few minutes hidden among the trees. One of them remarked that he should go check on the 3rd guard, who was taking too long to return. They feared that if the boss found out, he'd be furious about the team's disorganization. Suddenly, one of them noticed the other had vanished in the blink of an eye, as if by magic. Suspicious, he looked around, trying to identify any danger or anomaly in the environment. Seeing no one, he concluded that something was definitely wrong in that silent place. Meanwhile, the captured guard was already being held in another secure corner. The 3rd guard thought the other 2 had teamed up to scare him in a childish prank. He demanded that they reveal themselves or he'd activate all the traps scattered around the area without a second thought. However, he felt a chill and sensed that an intruder was very close. From above, the hero launched himself at him, saying he wouldn't allow the traps to be triggered. He used Thunder Ambush as his opening attack and moved with lightning speed. He activated Maximum Physique and boosted his right arm strength by 130%. He struck the last guard with precision, knowing the path to the entrance was finally clear. He notified Hugh via communicator to be careful with the traps scattered along the way. The Beastman wanted to know how the hero knew all the trap locations so precisely. Getting no answer, he asked if they should disable the remaining ones for safety. When Hugh went to pull the lever, he was stopped by the protagonist with a firm gesture. He stated that they would still need the traps and asked only to be followed closely. Hugh trembled in fear at the spikes beside them and wanted to fire more arrows at the fallen enemies. Suddenly, startled by some sudden movement, he let out a loud scream and almost fell. From atop a hill, he stated that this was the innermost chamber where the hostage was likely being held. The area was guarded by level 24 warriors, and Hugh said he would have already been defeated without the hero. The protagonist replied that he had only done what was right, but asked his ally to distract the guards. Hugh, lowering his head, said they had made it this far together, but now they had to split up. The hero, noticing his hesitation, assured him that he wasn't using him as a worthless chess pawn. Moved, Hugh asked if the protagonist had left the traps active on purpose to help. After learning that all the traps were marked on the map, the hero warned that dawn was approaching. Time was short, and everything needed to be executed without mistakes or unnecessary hesitation. The level 24 guards began to grow suspicious of the unusual silence from their usually loud comrades. Then, a rain of arrows struck the warriors' backs without any warning. It was Hugh attacking them all while shouting that he would crush those brutes one by one. Though unsure, he gripped the bow tightly, sweat pouring down his tense face. One of the warriors snapped an arrow and recognized Hugh as the archer from the day before. Roaring, he warned that he would tear the beast man apart with his bare hands without mercy. Seeing everyone charging toward him, Hugh truly began to worry about how it would end. He ran while hurling insults at the guards, hoping they would follow him into the traps. Meanwhile, the hero, hidden behind a tree, watched and said that if Hugh got caught, he'd be in serious trouble. He was preparing his own ambush for the exact moment, carefully observing every movement. He first needed to confirm whether the girl was really in the indicated location without rushing in. He heard the child's voice asking if the princess had eaten the evil witch's rotten apple. From a distance, he saw that the one telling the story was the wild leopard boss, a level 25 berserker. He was surprised to see him calmly reading a book to the little girl. The girl shouted that she would never eat such an apple because it would make her very sick and ruined. The leopard turned and threw a blanket over her, asking her not to look, pretending it was a game. In reality, he launched the protagonist away with a powerful kick, activating his secret skill. The hero expected nothing less from a leopard-class beast man who seemed extremely strong. After the kick, the leopard commented that the man didn't seem to be from the Pace Guild. The hero, confused, didn't understand why a kidnapper would be reading bedtime stories to a defenseless child. Now face to face with the leopard beast man, the hero began to doubt whether he was really a kidnapper. He thought that, for someone who had abducted a child, the man's earlier expression had seemed far too kind. Meanwhile, the leopard was impressed that the mercenary had ignored the traps and eliminated the guards. The protagonist said he was there on behalf of the guild to rescue Wenton's daughter, who had been kidnapped. The leopard, upon hearing that the hero was there strictly for business, didn't like the answer and launched another strike. The impact sent the hero flying a long distance from the spot where he had been hit. He knew the opponent was a berserker, and there was no time for meaningless talk during battle. If he wasted any more time and his allies returned, he'd be in serious trouble. Meanwhile, he was continuously being attacked by the leopard with no space to counter. So he decided to activate the divine eye to scan and assess his opponent's movements. He intended to reduce the large gap between their strength. At first, it seemed to work, as the hero's speed took the leopard by surprise. Then the hero used the thunder ambush attack. With that, he managed to buy some time in the fight, but he noticed that even with a perfectly executed move guided by the divine eye, the opponent managed to dodge. The leopard was irritated, unable to understand how an attack had managed to wound his hand. Trying to end things quickly, he activated max physique and enhanced the strength in his arms. The furious leopard wanted the hero to come to him, ready to finish it all right then, until the little beast girl appeared, calling out to her uncle, referring to the leopard beast man. When the beast man realized the girl was watching him, he saw her asking what he was doing. His expression instantly changed, becoming calm as if nothing was happening. Speaking softly and gently, he told the little girl she shouldn't have come out and asked her to go back to the tent. This only increased the hero's suspicion that the girl wasn't really being held as a hostage. The little girl, showing concern, wanted to look at her uncle's hands to see if he was hurt. She glared at the hero and said he shouldn't intimidate her uncle because he was a good person. The protagonist tried to explain that he was only there to rescue her and that he wasn't a bad man. But when he looked at the little beast girl, all he could see was the face of his own sister, as she looked so much like Karina. Still upset, the girl said she didn't want to be rescued because she liked it there and thought her uncle was very kind. The hero said that if there was any reason for that, she should explain it, unless they preferred to keep fighting. After picking up the child in his arms, the beast man asked the hero to follow him, as he would put the girl to sleep first. Inside the tent, he asked the hero to wait a moment, as the girl was afraid to sleep without hearing a story. After the girl fell asleep, the leopard revealed that Wenton could be described as the leader of a secret gang. The hero couldn't understand whether he worked for the merchant or why he had kidnapped his daughter. The leopard revealed that the man would do anything for money and extorted large sums from guilds. Now everything made sense to the protagonist, as from the beginning that man had only thought of profit. The leopard went on to explain that they were secretly hired as low-level bandits to carry out the plan. After hearing everything, the hero realized that this was how Wenton operated, strengthening defenses to attract business. It was then that he understood he was in deep trouble, because if anyone found out, he'd be eliminated. The leopard revealed that the child wasn't the merchant's daughter and had been stolen as a baby. The hero realized that, after using her as a hostage to obtain a fortune, the group planned to dispose of her. What didn't make sense was the girl being so attached to the leopard, until he confessed he was the one who had kidnapped her. The leopard admitted that the more the girl grew, the heavier his guilt became. The hero wanted to know if Wenton still had any plans for the girl or if there was any hope for her. He knew the leopard could easily take the girl and flee, but he didn't know about the debt of gratitude that kept him there. After hearing everything, the hero thought the best course of action was to cut ties with the merchant and run away with the girl. The leopard was torn between his immense debt to Wenton and the guilt of having ruined the child's future. However, the protagonist made it clear that the debt had already been repaid over the years, and that now he should escape. The leopard feared the merchant would hire other mercenaries to hunt them down. The hero turned and said he understood very well the pain the leopard was feeling. Even so, the leopard remained worried about what Wenton might do. As he stepped out of the tent, the hero stated that if the leopard couldn't resolve it alone, he would help. Meanwhile, the vice leader of the guild was running from the guards, leading them straight into traps. Now he was satisfied for having managed to get all of them captured while fleeing. But when a serious-looking man noticed the human was alone, he wanted to know where the girl was. The hero asked Hugh to return to the guild and report the mission's success to the president, while he would collect the reward. Running like lightning and full of joy, Hugh heard the president say he'd be waiting for him at the guild. After the beastmen left, the hero made a face of indignation, but he knew it was time to confront Wenton. The merchant, in his luxurious home, was counting his profits, though he felt the total was less than expected. His face turned pale with shock when he noticed someone else was in the room with him. Since he couldn't clearly see who it was, he asked, and the hero replied that he was the one who had a score to settle. Startled, Wenton began shouting for help, believing someone would rush in to rescue him. The hero told him that while he had been busy counting his earnings, his subordinates had already been eliminated. After he spoke those words, the grand mansion was shown from the outside, with no guards in sight. Along the path the protagonist had taken, the guards who tried to stop him lay scattered on the ground. The trembling merchant wanted to understand why someone from that guild would fight against top-tier warriors. Now he realized that the protagonist had approached silently and taken them out before they could react. Frightened, the merchant asked the protagonist if it was money he wanted, since he could simply name his price. The hero stepped closer and said he expected him to return the 5,000 coins to the guild. He then made it clear that he already knew about the children the merchant was raising. Those words from the hero left the beastman deeply worried, especially because the hero said he was curious. Desperate, the man offered the hero 50% of all his wealth in exchange for turning a blind eye. When the protagonist asked if he truly intended to go through with such a dirty plan, the beastman assured him it would be profitable. But from the look the hero gave him, the merchant's fate was already sealed. Still, the merchant thought the hero simply hadn't found the offer tempting enough. The protagonist told the merchant that at that moment, he was feeling greedy, and there was something he wanted very badly. Terrified, the merchant insisted that all he had to do was name it, and he'd get it. Already tired and out of patience, the protagonist used the thunder ambush attack. The next morning, many believed it must have been a surprise attack, as there were no signs of a struggle. No one knew who had entered that mansion and committed such a brutal crime. Examining Wenton's body, they noticed there was only evidence of a single strike that pierced his heart. Next to the body, a letter was found confessing to all the crimes he had committed. The black cat, who was among the crowd, had no doubt and knew very well who had caused that wound. He noticed that all the fatal injuries bore the mark of the ambush technique, which was the black cat's signature move. But after the investigation, they realized that man had not been a target of the guild, so they didn't know who could have done it. That's when an idea crossed the black cat's mind. It could have been that human warrior. The cat knew that man was, without a doubt, a warrior, but he didn't know his identity. The feline believed that if he reported this to the guild, he might be allowed back into the mercenaries. Distancing himself from everyone, he thought he should inform the guild leader immediately. Sometime later, at Pace Guild, the hero showed a chest filled with many gold coins. The man who had brought the hero there said he knew about his talent the moment he saw his previous success. The guild members believed that, with all the scandals surrounding Wenton coming to light, even his death hadn't been enough. However, the protagonist didn't care, since he had completed the request and even leveled up. He thought to himself that, after dealing with that merchant and his associates, the system had even granted him a bonus. That's when he realized that eliminating certain enemies granted more experience points, allowing him to level up faster. The guild leader congratulated the hero for leveling up, protecting the guild's honor, and earning them a great deal of money. The hero stated that his share, 250,000 gold coins, would be donated to homeless children or struggling families. That statement caught everyone in the guild by surprise, as no one expected the hero to be so generous. Tossing the coin pouch into the air, he said there were still many people in need of that money. Therefore, he would only take 250 coins, as originally agreed. After saying that, he said goodbye and left everyone with a great impression of him. Walking through the streets, he thought that he had already reached level 11 and was just one level away from reaching his goal. He thought maybe he should wait for her at the Adventurers Guild, but upon arriving, he noticed an unusual crowd. He didn't know why there were so many people there or what was going on. In the middle of the crowd, there was a large woman claiming to be the guild president's wife. She was arguing with Sakura because of her son, even though it was all a misunderstanding. Sakura said she was just standing there waiting for someone. The woman was irritated because she believed a half-beast had no right to call her son a liar. The young man claimed there was no way he had stumbled into anyone, and therefore, Sakura was lying. The guard asked the girl that if she had bumped into the young master, she should apologize. The girl, upset, said that even if no one believed her, she wouldn't tolerate that kind of insult. The commotion only grew, with more people gathering to see what was happening. With her head down, Sakura asked if no one was willing to speak up for her. The woman, tired of demanding an apology, lost her temper and slapped her. The guard simply told Sakura to stop being stubborn and to know her place. After being slapped and thrown to the ground, she firmly said she would not apologize. The woman claimed she had the power to ensure Sakura wouldn't live to see the next sunrise. That's when suddenly, a figure leaped in and struck the woman across the face. Her son began screaming, shocked that someone had dared to hit his mother. But the hero only looked at the boy with a steady gaze. Then he decided to slap the boy as well, to teach him a lesson. Sakura, the guard, and the entire crowd were stunned as they stared at that man. The hero declared that he didn't like it when people insulted and assaulted Sakura. He stated that it didn't matter who that woman was, she would have to face the consequences.
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.